meeting of the Addison Northwest School District School Board. So I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second, sorry.
Thank you. I know, we're just driving. All right, great. We do have a couple changes to the agenda tonight. We need to remove action item F, auditor contract. That was just an error. And we would like to switch the order of the board reports so that the business manager goes first and the superintendent report is second.
Do you need a motion for that?
I think all in favor of accepting that agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on. Brings us to public communication. Stephanie.
The student rep emailed me today saying he wasn't able to attend tonight. That's all I know.
Okay. I hope he's well. Also, Chris Kuzma said he was not feeling well, so he won't be here either. Do we have any other public communication? Sure.
I don't know if you're aware that January all month is School Board Recognition Month. Perhaps you've heard that. So we want to thank you for your service. Glory actually prepared some, she's busy writing, so she can't stop for a minute, and prepared some certificates for you to recognize you.
Nice, that's awesome.
And we also thought that we could organize you for a photograph for the annual report, if that's all right. We need a group photo. Is that okay? I brought my camera. Do you want to do it while you're fresh or at the end? Let's do it now.
Okay.
Could we all hold our?
We can all hold our certificates. Also, I don't know if you all got it in the mail already, but the VSBA.
Yeah, I got my card in the mail, yeah.
Sending us
We
all
got thank
a
you cards.
coupon for a
So
free
nice.
pair of Darn Tough socks, which is, so see, it pays to be on the school board.
Oh, wait a minute, there's something about socks?
Those are nice socks.
Yeah. You got a little card, and it's a congratulations
Yeah.
for being on the board.
Oh, are you
And there's a
kidding? I
coupon
loved
in
it.
I
there
missed
for
the
a free
coupon,
pair-
oh no.
Free pair of socks.
I hope
But
I
I'll
didn't,
bet you have to pay the shipping, and it'll cost more than the socks.
I hope I didn't recycle it, I didn't see the coupon. Should we hold up our certificates? Oh, yeah.
This is going in the annual report. I'll mention this next part, and if anyone's uncomfortable with this, we don't have to do it, but we thought that we would feature you each one at a time on the Facebook page and give your answers to a few questions that we've developed. The questions being how long you've been on the board, or associated in school boards. What do you most enjoy about being on a board, and what do you do in your spare time for fun? Because as if you have any time.
Somebody else,
If anyone says not for me, then we'll maybe let you off the hook, but otherwise I think.
You didn't read the list of meetings that we have to attend each month, and now you're talking about spare time?
That's what we like to do for fun.
That was the joke part. That's why we all laughed. All right, I'll stand up for you, just in case. You look so nice, look at you.
You're good at this one. She put her subjects at ease.
Shakes
She
a
did
rattle
say,
off
what do
to
you
the
like
side.
to do for fun? She didn't say, what do you do?
It's true.
All right, thank you all for waiting for that. Yes.
All right.
Okay.
And when did you say the selfies were happening?
Maybe
The
during
selfies.
this meeting.
Not selfies, but yeah, okay.
if that's
Individuals.
okay. Individuals,
The
before you
headshots.
leave.
Or they could send selfies.
Or if you prefer to send one of your own and take your time with
Yeah.
it.
No, could you send me one? Oh, yeah, that was terrible.
But I can take a shot,
Okay,
that picture before you go.
okay, thank you.
Okay. We won't do that now.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing us. That's very sweet. Okay, so we move on to board education, which is just we had a written report on responsive classroom and PBIS. thank you for sharing this. It's obvious that there's a lot of work going on in this area. Do we have questions? Okay. I would like to know what are positive postcards?
Can you speak up?
Positive postcards?
Positive postcards, do you wanna speak to that?
So at Addison Central, we've only done it twice so far, but at the beginning of a staff meeting, we've printed out all the students' addresses with labels, and to make sure there's, equal representation, and we're taking the first 5 minutes of staff meeting to write a positive note to a family and pop it in the mail at the beginning of staff meeting to ensure that we're giving our teachers time to actually make that happen. While it's something we've talked about before, creating that 5-minute space at the beginning of staff meeting really ensures that it happens, and then creating all the labels knows somebody doesn't get 4 postcards and somebody doesn't, get any kind of thing. So we're trying to spread the
Organize
wealth
it. All right.
and just share with families a positive moment from all staff, not just classroom teachers.
Well, that's cool.
That's the same things happening at Virginia's Elementary.
Nice. Okay, great. And I guess I had one other question. How is the impact of all of this being tracked? Is that through the screener? And it sounds like we're kind of moving to that phase, but is that through the screener, or is that looking for fewer referrals?
Yes, all of that.
Both? So the screener does help with that as well? Okay. Cool.
I think at Addison we're using primarily Swiss right now, but that's like, the screener will be happening. But right now we look at Swiss
Okay.
data, which tells us where the referral comes from, who's referring, who else was involved, time of day. So if we see a child who only has a hard time Fridays at 2:30, what's going on for that student, right? So it just allows us to look for patterns and
Right.
both time of day, location, and the person referring.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
Is the data being collected, how is the data being collected? Is it do we have a data management
Yes,
system that
Swiss.
we're using?
Yes, it's called Swiss. It's
Swiss, you said?
Swiss,
School-wide
WSWIS.
something.
And it's, I don't know, it's not state software, but certainly a software that many schools in the state use for that exact purpose. It collates well with PBIS. They're made to go together.
Okay, great, thank you.
Awesome. Anything else on that? Great. Well, thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to go to the business manager's report. Hello. Thank you.
I guess we'll start with like the regular monthly financial. I don't think there's anything, unless people have questions. I did notice one thing that I forgot to put in my business manager report regarding the current financials, and that is, we had to make an adjustment. There's one function code that's showing a deficit in the month of December, and it's because we posted an adjustment for some grant funding in a salary code, and it didn't post till January. So that negative number in, I think it's curriculum 2210 in the general fund, actually goes away in January. So it's just a timing issue between December and January and when we posted something in the system. So it's not really a negative 20-something thousand dollars there. So that's the only thing I noticed that I didn't note in my report. I don't know if anybody has any questions specifically about the financials for the current month.
Nope, I don't see any.
So I
Thank you.
also included this month a report that I created in the software. I worked hard to try to find something that I could give to you guys, because last time we
Thank you.
had a billion separate reports to give all the same data. So I actually built this in the software in the same functionality that we build your regular financial statements. But I was able to get it to pull in fund balances from the prior year and then basically show what any current year revenue would be by fund in that report and just pull them all together. So still quite a few pages in there, but at least it's all in the same format, the same way, and you're not leafing through multiple pages for each fund. You're getting each fund in its entirety. So I don't know how people feel about that. Was that a lot easier to look at? And then I tried to incorporate in my report a little bit of tutorial, like how to read this.
Yeah, which was still a little confusing for some of us, but
Hopefully it was a little bit helpful.
much easier than the multitude of pages we got last time.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I can think of that's really confusing by that report is when you guys see your monthly financials, you're used to seeing an expense report that has everything encumbered, so your available balance has that taken out of it. And then likewise, on a revenue report, you guys are seeing an anticipated value because I'm estimating what I believe we're gonna receive. I can't really do that on like all those other funds. I can't anticipate what we're gonna have for revenue in a lot of cases. So what you don't see is like an anticipated revenue on each one of those grant funds. So that might make it a little more confusing because it's not exactly what you're used to seeing on the other general fund.
So it did look like none of the title funds have posted yet. Is that true, like Title
We have
I?
not actually received any of our
Is
title
that
funding.
typical, or is this late?
It is not typical.
Is that a shutdown thing?
No. So one of the things that happened this year is they changed their whole grants management system. They changed us to what's called a reimbursement mode for all of our federal grants. And so the first thing that means is that instead of being able to file a report every quarter and tell the government, we need this much money to fund all these things in this grant for the next 3 months and being able to advance ourselves, we have to wait till the end of the quarter and file saying we've already paid out all of this money for all these things and now pay us back, and then wait for them to pay us. The other thing is it's all a new system where you enter it into the, it's like a web-based program that you enter all the data into. A lot of the grants didn't get their substantial approval, or they were in an amendment mode. The way the system works is you can't apply to receive any of your funding unless it's out of amendment mode and it's fully approved and executed.
Is this the federal government or state?
It's through the state, but this is affecting mostly your federal grants. So it's the bigger ones. It's IDEA-B and
Yeah,
all
I
of those
noticed.
title grants. There is a few smaller ones like the ADAP, the tobacco, those ones. But it does also affect, they are starting to put things like Act 230 and Best Grant, which are our state-funded grant, in that same system also. So it is affecting some of those state-run grants also.
So we're going to have to advance money.
We have. That's why you've had to borrow money too. It's part of the reason why we had to borrow when we didn't think we were going to have to.
And this is a 6-month period because you have to borrow it to pay it, and then you file for it, and it takes them at least 3 months to pay.
They have gotten better about the paying out, like once we actually bill it. So we did billing, we were able to put in for like your 21C grant and a few others after the first quarter. And they paid it within 2 weeks. They actually, it isn't taking them as long to pay it out. So that part of it has gotten better once you're able to file. The difficulty is, like with the CFP, we didn't actually get our final approval from our amended version of that grant and the title grants until a few weeks ago. So we're just filing for our money now for the last 6 months.
Is that because it's a new system, or not a new system, but
It's
like a
whole
new
gamut
version of this?
It's everything. It's, being a new system, the people applying for a grant didn't necessarily know how to use it
Right.
or how to apply or what to put in. And then it took, the state was behind, and them going in and approving your grant was slower.
So presumably
it's
moving
just
forward,
everything.
it'll
Yeah.
be more, presumably. I mean,
Presumably, yes.
Hopefully, yeah.
If we had an approved award for July 1st, we'd be able to start requesting our money as soon as our quarter ends, and they'd pay us within. The other nice thing about this system is they actually are not limiting you to when you can file anymore. So at this point, I can start filing monthly if I want to. I don't have to continue on the quarterly basis and be fronting our money for a whole quarter as we get going. We can do it monthly and get money flowing in faster. But we're still having to show that we paid it out first before we ask for it.
Okay. I mean, we have, I believe, a $50,000 line item to pay interest on these funds that we borrow, correct?
Yes. And I've been able to actually reduce that in the current year because what we've done is we've projected out our cash flow a little further. We were able to pay off the line of credit that we asked you to borrow, so we used it when we needed it. We've paid it off now. We don't owe anything right now, and we're just gonna keep watching that cash flow. If we end up feeling like we need some more, we'll have to come back and ask. But that's so that you don't have a line of credit sitting out there accruing interest all
Right.
year long, rather than just
Smart.
paying it off
Right.
and starting over if we need it.
Thank
So
you.
that's what we're doing, to
Okay.
try to save on the money for the interest.
Yeah, I know. Fiscal management.
That's great.
Go ahead.
Boy. This is a new thing here.
Did you have a question, Lori?
There's 13,000 some odd dollars left in the transition grant for the Act 46. Is that spoken for?
It is. Sorry.
Okay. I was going to try to get it for the CEC.
It's currently encumbered for a multitude of things. We have the website in there. We have some assistance from our software company to do code conversion, and then there's also potentially some money in there for the server, but then there's also been conversation about swapping that out and paying for that with something else. So, but pretty much there's a place for all of that money at this time.
Thank you.
So the food service, the expected or the budgeted income for student sales and adult sales look like we haven't even gotten to about a fifth of that, and we're halfway through the year.
Yeah,
Is
so one of the things is you're always about a month behind in getting it all posted. First of all, they're a little bit different in that when they do their claims billing, it probably is more like a 45-day wait before you actually get your check.
Okay.
When you're doing like the federal and the state file claiming for money on food service. We are posting monthly, so whenever we get, the daily deposits, those are going in as quickly as they possibly can. We also are starting to reconcile all those monthly so that we can allocate how much is student sales versus adults and post the catering and all of that. So we're watching it. It does look like it's lower, but there also isn't a consistency to when you get your money with food service, meaning there are certain months where you will see higher participation, and I'm not the best person probably to estimate what those months are, but I don't think we want to use just a September through December as a gauge, because there are certain months
Because us parents get more tired in the spring.
December tends to be a little on the low side because of all the holiday vacation and stuff like that, so.
Okay. So too early to tell.
Too early to tell, yeah.
Okay. And what does CN stand for on those?
Child nutrition.
Ah.
It's a nicer way to say food service.
Okay. Any other questions on that fund report?
All right.
Okay.
So I also have, in your packet, we sent out an audit draft. This audit draft, the only thing that was missing from this version on the day that I got it from our auditing firm, I was going back and forth. There was a few changes that I wanted made. They still were missing a couple of figures for like our retirement and, the Vermont municipal retirement and things like that. They've now gotten all those numbers. So since this draft, they've given me an updated draft. I haven't gone through and checked it. It just came like Friday, I think it came. So I'm pretty sure it's all just little numbers being plugged in wherever you see little holes in here. There's nothing really that surprising in here. The only thing I wanted to mention is, as you can, I think I noted in my business manager report, we have a $480,192 surplus at the end of FY18 in our general fund. That's those three funds that make up our general fund combined. We are applying all of that in our calculations to your budget for next year, because we confirmed it in this audit that that's the amount we have. And the other thing I wanted to make mention of, if you look through some of the other funds in here, you'll see that there's still deficits showing, and I just want to remind everyone that that's because those couldn't be funded in FY18. We voted in FY18, and they're being funded in FY19. So those will go away when we do this year's audit.
Cool.
And your auditors are scheduled to come to the February 11th meeting and go over what will be a management letter at that time, kind of like they did last year. They'll go point by point and kind of explain to you where we're at with each item on the audit or on that management letter. I haven't actually seen the management letter yet, so it's supposed to be coming the next week or so that I can take a look at it before.
Isn't that the one dated December 12th?
Yeah.
That's what I thought. Why, we don't have, okay.
I don't have a management letter, but I don't think there's
It's
going
out
to
there
be as much
somewhere.
on it as there was before.
Yeah,
I think it will be shorter.
I mean, I'm no expert at reading audits, but it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
There's only one finding, right? On the audit?
On this, that's an old finding. If you look at the top, that's the
Yeah.
prior year finding.
That's one- okay,
They
yeah.
have to put that in your audit to show what you had the year before.
Right.
But that audit point has been taken away in this audit.
All right.
It's no longer an issue. And that was on your single audit for your federal awards.
Okay.
And it was originated in FY16, I think.
I'm looking at budgetary highlights in the financial statements, the draft financial statements, and we have capital assets. And I'm wondering, did that show up last year? And I missed it, or is this the first year that we actually?
Which page are you looking at?
I am looking at
Just so I can.
14, actually.
14.
14 of the PDF, yeah. Page 14 of the PDF, yeah. Well, it's a 10, it says 10 on the,
Oh,
on the report itself. It says 14 on me PDF.
okay,
Me
gotcha.
PDF.
Gotcha.
PDF reader.
Page number at the bottom was what I was looking
The-
at. Okay.
Right, the
Page
PDF reader,
10,
page
page
10
10.
of the actual document.
Right.
Yes, they would have had that in the audit. Maybe it's on a different page. You can see that that's construction in progress, so that's probably how far we had gotten on our bond project by that point in time, the buildings and improvements. But we did update these numbers because I had to give them the whole new fixed asset spreadsheet, which also included all your buildings, all of the improvements you've made over the years. So, yeah, they did.
And
make
you did
adjustments
that?
to this.
You like
Yeah.
gave them that?
Yes.
This is,
Oh,
thank you,
oh,
thank you.
really?
That's a tremendous accomplishment.
That is so
Thank you.
big.
It's all in
Jesus.
spreadsheets, which is not ideal, but.
Yes.
And
Well,
signed it.
at least it's on a spreadsheet. It
It's
wasn't
all on a
on anything
spreadsheet, which is
before.
not really great. I'd rather have it in like a fixed asset, software module or something. We'll get there,
But it's somewhere.
but right now, it's there. Yeah.
It exists.
I know.
And I can update them. So all I have to do each year is add, anything new to it that we've purchased that meets the capitalization threshold or improvements we've made. And then there's calculations in there to calculate the depreciation that they're supposed to book against it.
Wonderful.
What is our capitalization?
It's $5,000
5,000.
per item. So it's not an aggregate purchase, it's per item. So a computer would not probably fall in there unless it was a $5,000 computer.
So looking at, this is table 1, it's on page 11 of the PDF reader and page 7. Where it says the current liabilities on 2018 and they're, I don't know, 2.5 million bigger than 2017.
Liabilities.
Is that the,
That would be the bond, right? Or, well,
Well, yep, so
Yeah,
you've
yeah.
got bond money in there. You've got any line of credit in there. I'd have to look at the detail to see what all the current liabilities are. I think it's also, unfortunately, the current liabilities is also a little bit skewed sometimes because of whatever you decided to pay out. You had a situation at the end of your consolidation where you paid out all of your bills, like on June 30th, just so that they weren't wrapping over into the new year on the consolidated district.
which was
So it's a lower, so you,
2017.
so you would have shown a lower number for your total liabilities, whereas years after that, you don't have to cut all your checks on June 30th. You can hang them out there and post them as accrued to that year, but still cut your checks in July and August or whenever you need
this one
to.
might be false.
So you're gonna have a larger number in 18 for liabilities, just for that reason right there. You're talking teacher salaries over the
Wrapped up
summer.
the books.
You're talking, benefits for Blue Cross Blue
right,
Shield.
2017 is lower than it would normally look.
Right, yes.
Got
Makes
it.
sense.
Okay.
One last question. I thought, maybe I'm just misunderstanding, but I thought I heard you say we have a $400,000 surplus, but I'm looking at the financial statements and I see 159.7.
What page are you on?
I am on 16 of the PDF and 12 of the actual PDF of the financial statements. Actual
I don't
document.
understand why they're,
Well,
It is.
this is
What
a
line?
statement, okay, so this is a statement of net position. That is not your fund balance or your surplus deficit. So,
It's a statement
you
of that
look-
position.
so.
okay. In my mind, it's what-
kind of like a
it's-
balance
numbers
sheet,
you're just
but
looking
it's
at.
showing, it's showing everything, though. It's bringing all of your capital assets, your special revenue funds, and everything all into one. That's not just your general fund. So your statement of net position brings everything in governmental, so it's not just your, when I said $480,000 surplus, I'm
just the
talking your
general
general operating fund, which is your special ed, your early ed, and your general.
So I ought to be able to,
So if you look at page 17, the page number at the bottom, it says page 17,
yeah.
that's where you can see your net change in fund balances, and you see the positive 480,192,
Thank you. So, yeah. Okay.
and that's your general fund. And then each other one is separated out, and like the performance contract one shows this huge negative number. That's because we started doing the work and started borrowing on the bond before we actually had the bond. We didn't have the bond until August, was when we actually got it.
Thank you.
Right out the door.
Came in
Did.
and out. It was well
It's
well
not
used.
quite all gone, but most of it.
Awesome.
Our audit expenses are going down for 1920, huh?
Yes. That's because they indicated when we first signed up with them, that once you were consolidated and the year after, they'd still have to do a little bit of audit work on all those old entities to close them out for year one. But then after that, they wouldn't have to do multiple financial statements or multiple audits. They'd only be doing the one. So, yeah.
Plus, there's the factor that everything is properly aligned and ready for them.
Yes, it's easier for them, right?
Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you again.
And we are going to go out to bid. That's why we don't have it on to approve
Right.
a renewal of an auditor. We're going to
That's
do a
out.
bid, and just for the, just because it's been a couple of years, and that's what we should do. It's best practice to send it out to bid and see who we get.
Right.
So,
If anybody.
Oh, boy.
if anybody.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple in the state that are still doing it besides RHR. So we'll see how that
Did you have
turns out.
something else?
That'll probably be something we do towards the end of January, early February, and put that out to bid, which means you'd be approving either at one of the February meetings or the early March meeting.
So this is what we're gonna get, another version of this, with an extra management
Yeah, with
letter
the
or something.
With a management letter, yep. Yep. And I actually already have the draft that's probably gonna get approved. I just don't have the management letter.
Okay.
All right. Well, it's January, so that's fantastic. All right.
Okay, and so then the next thing we have is, we have the budget information that was
Look,
sent.
Can I give just a brief little timeline before you delve into this?
Sure.
Just for everyone. So we entered into the budget season back in November with some information gathering and some goal setting with the committee, right? About maintaining high-quality education and funding our continuous improvement plans and all of that. And on November 12th, we initially here reviewed 2 budget drafts, a level program and the strategic budget. And we actually did not review a level funded budget because the administration determined that we would need to cut entire programs from our schools to keep to a level budget. Level program budget at that time was going to be a 10% or 30-cent tax increase over our current budget. And
Which budget did you say?
the level program budget and the strategic budget came in actually higher than that. So we've been working over the last couple meetings, the administration's been working and bringing new iterations of that budget with decreasing costs each time, right? So we looked at it again on November 22nd and a third look on December 10th. And we were down to, I believe on December 10th, we asked for a decrease of another about 220,000 to try and get us below the per pupil threshold. Correct? Just wanted to put that all out there, so go ahead.
All right, so do you want to hand that out?
Do you think this
Yep.
would be helpful? So to kind of go along with what Sue just described as our process, we developed kind of a summary of those changes in bulleted form, so you could see both what was incorporated into the level program budget at the onset, what was added in our original strategic budget, and then the second draft version of the strategic budget, what had changed, and now the iteration that we're bringing forward today, the revised strategic budget, what's changed again. So I think that probably that's where we want to focus, on what's different between the last version of the budget and this one. Take a look at it for a second.
Sorry, what's a column change estimate?
So in our negotiated agreement in the teacher salary, when someone moves from one column on the
Yeah, yeah,
salary
right,
scale
right,
to
right, right,
the
right,
next, yeah. So do you want a few minutes just to review this? Would that be helpful, or should we talk through it, or?
Yeah, let's take a couple minutes, I guess.
And just again, as a reminder, we're in the second column all the way at the bottom tonight. This is just the history.
Sheila, do you want to speak to some of these
Sure.
latest changes?
We can talk through, yeah, so, you know, I guess, as you can see, getting from where we were to getting to where we are now is slightly painful. So I think, you know, to kind of talk through that, and Stephanie can also, I think, add. But to begin with, what I put on there, just to make you aware, is that this strategic budget includes the elimination of one of our world languages. So we currently have one world language offered, 2 sections, which represents 0.35 of a person's time, and we are proposing to eliminate that program, which would bring the number of world languages offered from 3 to 2. We can maybe go through the list and then come back to any that you have questions about. Does that make sense? Because I think we might get stuck on one and not talk about the others. So we eliminated 2 full-time positions through natural attrition. One of those was through our early retirement incentive, and one was not. It was just someone else that didn't qualify for the incentive that's also retiring. We reduced 0.2 FTE of 2 specials positions. So again, that's a half a day per person, 0.1 and 0.1. And that's due to declining enrollment or scheduling needs. The reduction of the 0.5 FTE of a high school health teacher is really not a reduction. It's based on the original strategic budget included an ad, and it's walking back from that ad. And if with dual certification, and if we have someone that can teach both PE and health, we can do it with fewer bodies in the building. So that's what that one's all about. Again, for declining need, we have about a 0.8 of special ed services that are not needed. We eliminated a position that was added in the original strategic budget that was a library assistant position. We, based on need, are able to reduce our contracted services with CSAC. And then we adjusted the energy efficiency estimates, the special project lines, and some of those things you picked up on the last iteration of the budget. And then the last 2 were just based on actual tech center tuition and contracted services for pre-K. We just got those a little bit closer to what was expected. So, what questions do you have?
What world language are we going to still have?
So we currently have 3. We have German, Spanish, and French, and this would be eliminating French.
Oh.
So there are 23 students in 2 sections.
And this
students in German. That's individual students, not students counted twice if they're taking 2 sections of the class. 47 students in Spanish and 23 in French. 22% of our high school student body takes German, it's 15% Spanish, and about 7% French.
So when we cut the ACS specials, how does that affect equity in, in all the schools?
Sure. So it has to do with all the kids in our district get PE twice a week, so that's not affected. Because we have combined classrooms at ACS, it's required that kids would have art, music, those specials once a week. Currently, we have a day and a half. Those teachers are doing some co-teaching and project work. But when you're asked to look at reductions and what is actually required, I mean, it is a reduction, but it would still meet the quality standards for those basic specials.
And the ACS kids are getting the same amount of time as FCS as VUES.
That's required by, those are the quality standards that she was speaking about.
Okay, thank you. And then the 2 positions that we eliminated via natural attrition, does that affect our programming?
So no on one. So one is just, it would have probably ended up as a reduction in force if we hadn't seen it come up through natural attrition. So that one is a definite no. The other one, I'll let Stephanie speak.
I'll tell you, the other one isn't a retirement from RRC. And so that would leave 1 full-time person in RRC. That's not a reduction in programming. The reduction in programming is the reduction in French. The reduction in RRC will impact the other administrators, I mean all of us, in dealing with student needs, and it will involve the counselors more. But we're trying to take advantage of attrition as opposed to reducing positions and eliminating jobs. So that seems to be a place where, at this point, on paper, we can do that. I hope that I'll be able to supplement that in other ways.
I'm sorry, what's RRC?
Resource Response Center. That's you've heard presentations about that. That's how we handle behavior and social emotional needs of our students.
Right, and we had I think 3 folks in there
We
a year
had
ago or
4
so.
folks when I started.
Okay.
We're down to 2 right now.
So you'll be down to 1 then? Is that
Yes.
what you're saying? Yeah. And are you hoping to divide those responsibilities in the building somehow?
I
think you
have a
said
variety
admin
of
and counselors.
plans. Yeah, you know, there's no doubt any of these will have an impact on our ability to serve kids.
Right. Lori?
I just want to make a comment that in a time period that we, as a society, are putting more and more pressure on our families and our children, and our schools have to do more and more with social and developmental and emotional issues, we're cutting our emotional issue fabulous. I guess this is just the way it is. It's, anyway.
What didn't?
I don't want to cut programs either, but.
What about the numbers that correlate with the budget?
Yeah, did you have one last question first?
Well, and maybe this isn't for now. Maybe this is a conversation that we should be having in the spring about RRC and the guidance system and its changes. Right, because I mean, I thought one of the reasons why the administration systems were changed and that we approved them last year to have 3 administrators, Stephanie, Jay, and Ed, was in part to deal with some of these, was a restructuring of responsibilities. So it's not that we're not losing someone who's important, but hopefully that was already built into the system last year, but I don't, that's what I understood when I thought we were making that decision last year. Is that wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I've known about this possible retirement for a while, and I've been trying to build capacity for that. I will say, we have high needs. Every school has high needs. It's why we have social and emotional programming now. So, I wouldn't suggest it if I didn't think we could handle it, but, I worry about kids' needs. That said, we have strong counselors. We have clinicians in the building. We're very fortunate to have the clinicians that we do. So,
Yes, let's hear about the numbers.
So I also sent along with the budget, I sent the new calculation for the estimated tax rate. I tried to put some little notes you'll see on some of the lines down through there to try to compare it to either tell you where the number came from, when it's been updated, or how it compares to last year, to kind of give you a little bit of a gauge. So it starts out, again, with the expenditure budget. You take your local revenues, which is everything except for your on-behalf tech center payment and your education funding. You're basically backing yourself into what is considered education funding. We're applying the entire surplus that we have in our audit from last year. And we still, the AOE keeps on publishing new numbers for your equalized pupils. That is another one of those situations where it keeps on coming out differently. Part of that is I don't know if any of you have read like Vermont Digger about the whole, census information coming in and not being able to get that information to the state of Vermont and all of that information. That's what's driving your equalized pupil number to keep on moving. As more districts get their numbers in, the base changes, and then that fluctuates everybody. It doesn't just fluctuate our district because we did or didn't have our data in. It's fluctuating because everybody didn't have their data in. Our data is in at this point, so ours isn't moving in huge ways at this time. But for instance, today Burlington's just went in, so I don't know if you have it.
Will
That's a
that
larger
bring us-
district that can really kind of
Bring us down or
the
up?
number.
Or
It's
who
been.
knows?
I can tell you that if you look back at the budget presentation we did when we first brought you the budget, I think I had one of these calculation sheets. I had to estimate my own number. They hadn't given us anything yet. So I estimated low. I estimated 960 point something. And I did that by using their spreadsheets from last year and trying to figure out your enrollment. It has gone, they started out with a 978, and then they trickled back all the way almost to my number, and now they're back somewhere around this 967.81. It's still been fluctuating by like a half of a kid or something up or down from this number. And it has moved twice since I did this for you and sent this out to you. So it's still a moving number. So when we, decide to approve a budget, we have to know that the bottom line stays the same of expenditures. That's what you approve, but some of these numbers can still move. There's other things that can change. So for instance, last year, after we all voted in our budgets, even the voters approved it, our number down here that's below the last bolded line, that's the tax yield for homestead, that number changed at the legislature. So your tax rate that we estimated last year was gonna raise by 8 cents, actually only rose by like 2.5. And it's because that number changed. So there's just change that can happen after we vote these in. And I just wanted to make that pretty clear. I'll continue to update. I'm not seeing astronomical changes in your number for your equalized pupil. Like I said, it's half of a student. It's not fluctuating. And for the most part, the changes I've seen have gone in your favor, which means the number's rising, not falling at this point.
And the threshold has not been changing, though?
Threshold has not changed. It's 18,311. That's your threshold. We are above it by that $765.27. However, you have debt service credits that allows you to stay below the penalty. I was further educated on the penalty. I think it was Mark that originally asked, what is the penalty?
Right.
And so when I asked that question to the state, their response was, well, it's not really a penalty. You just get charged in your tax rate for the amount you're over. Now, I understood that to mean, well, we just get charged for what our equalized pupil number is. That was incorrect. I misunderstood. What it means is if you're over the penalty and you don't have credits like we do for debt service, you'll not only pay for your whole amount, but then the amount that you're over, they'll tax you again on it.
Okay, so it's a
Okay,
double.
so it's a double tax if you're over the threshold and have no debt credits.
not
We're
a
not in that
penalty.
situation, but I know.
I know, right?
I think that's a penalty.
It sounds like a penalty.
It sounds like a penalty. Yeah, so, and it would make your tax rate even higher. So just by having those credits doesn't mean we get to use that threshold of 18,311. We still have to use the 19,076. We just don't get penalized additionally for it. So when we calculate it out, it basically is bringing, the estimate is that it's gonna go 8 cents higher overall. That was our estimate last year. It didn't actually happen because of the yield changing after. But there's no way to estimate if that's gonna happen. Now, this is already considering your consolidation incentive. It dropped to 6 cents this year, which is 2 cents lower than last year. That'll continue to drop 2 cents, for 5 years till it's gone. If you look at some of the numbers, my notes say the equalized union tax rate, I'm saying, is 0.0061, so it's 0.6 of a cent lower than the FY19 estimate, but your tax incentive is lower by 2 cents. Your estimated union tax rate with your incentive applied is 0.0139, higher than FY19. That's basically the net difference between all three of those numbers, if you do the math between them. And then I did give you a note that we estimated last year to be 1.7146, and the actual was 0.0664 less than that. So that's where I'm saying you really only came in at about 2 cents higher last year than what you were the year before. So basically, we're at like an 8 cent estimated increase using this budget. And that's if nothing changes.
3 cent, did you say?
8 cents. 8 cents.
8.
8 cents.
Oh, right there, okay.
Just over 8 cents at the very bottom, yeah. And they have not published last year they gave us this kind of magical state estimated number. You know, this is what we expect taxes to increase or decrease. They haven't given us anything like that. They've said some statements like they'd like to see everybody be below 3.5% on their budgets or their education spending. Our budget, as you have it presented here from expenditures, is 5% higher than last year.
What was the pure pupil, per pupil, or the equalized per pupil? What were our equalized pupils last year? Sorry.
979, you mean the number of students? It was
Yeah.
around 979.
So we're expecting like
It's a decline.
10
Yeah.
equalized student decrease.
Yeah, so more like 12 right now, but, yeah. And when I did your estimating, I was guessing 19, so it is better than what I estimated. I estimated worst-case scenario for you guys.
That's good.
I wanted to tell you better news, not worse news. And the year before, I think you dropped like 40 students. I mean, there was one year in here where you guys
Yes.
really dropped. They do have a hold harmless threshold that allows you to only drop by a certain percentage each year. But that hold harmless would have put you at like 945 this year. So if you'd have dropped like that, you still would have seen quite a substantial change.
So given this scenario here, we wouldn't have any of the double taxing because of
We would not, because we have those debt credits. We're $220 below the amount of our debt credits, which is good. So it gives us a little bit of leeway. If that per pupil number changes slightly, we can still afford to use our debt credits and not have the penalty.
But we're still asking the taxpayers for an 8 cent tax increase.
Yep.
And we are going to be over what the state has recommended for an increase in the budget by at least 1.5%.
And we're impacting programming.
I
And I think-
understand
To do that.
but-
Yeah, and I think the other thing to remember is, I think in the current year that you're in, we were probably the lowest in the state. You know, the state asked us to come in at, something percent, and we came in at like 1.5%
Did too good of a job last year.
We just did too good of a job, yeah. So we really kept it down last year. And the other thing I wanted to make sure, that's why I was talking about, last year we projected that 8-cent increase, we actually only got 2. So I wanted to make sure people understood, it's not 8 cents last year and 8 cents this year. It's not 16 cents over
Right.
2 years. It really only ends up being, if this is true, it only ends up being 10 cents over 2 years.
But that 8 cents, even if all this stays, could go up or down
It
as well.
could. Right, and this isn't affected by anybody's CLA or anything, so this is not town-driven, this is your unified tax
How
rate.
much impact does the CLA have on that, 8 cents?
It depends on the town. So
Yeah.
you might have some towns that are gonna go higher than 8 cents, and then you have some that are gonna go lower than 8 cents. That's what it does.
Right.
It doesn't average it out, it's all based on your town.
Well, at some point, we're gonna want to know that when we go back to our towns.
That's based on 100%.
And I think the CLAs did go out to your individual towns, like I think your towns
The
people
Colorado
have.
River.
I think they have their CLAs now, so they'd have their rate.
Do you have any sense how we're comparing to neighboring school districts?
Yeah, I was gonna ask that same question.
Well,
They're,
they're all over the map.
They are.
right, I mean, I
We've
feel like
done
I've
a
seen some
hand
pretty
show
high.
at some of my business manager meetings, and I think they've done that at the
Yeah.
superintendent's meetings.
Yeah.
And I was seeing a lot of hands come up around the 5% mark. You saw a lot less come up when you were above that 5% mark, so that's why I really wanted to make sure we were either at 5 or below. I had hoped it would go lower. I said that in my business manager report. I had hoped we could bring it lower, but it doesn't seem fiscally responsible to go lower. It doesn't seem, with the programming cuts and such, that we'd have to do more of that in order to get lower than where we are. But there's not that many people below 5%, really, from what I could see. There's a couple in the 2-3% range, but most of us are in the 4 or 5%.
And again, to
area.
go back to what we talked about back in November, we have a 13% increase on our transportation contract, 11% increase on healthcare costs. Those were the two main ones that I can remember, where there,
And we're going to have an increase in our salaries, period, end of sentence.
we are in negotiations right now with both teachers and support staff.
Yes, no one has ever negotiated no salary increase. Is that a correct statement? Has anyone ever negotiated?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my knowledge, yeah.
But
Yeah, so
that's
it's
in
definitely going to
negotiation,
be-
but that's in negotiation, so probably.
Yeah, well, anyway.
We're committed to high-quality staffing.
Of course.
So if we keep the world languages, we can go to the taxpayers, we can go to the voters and we can say, our programs work and we maintain all of our programs, if we keep that.
Is that the only one that's actually a program cut? Yeah.
That's not a program cut. You still have PE and you still have library.
It's a
Yeah,
reduction.
yeah.
Reduction.
So that is,
Program cut. We won't
This is
have
actually a
French
whole
anymore.
class, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
so, you think, so what are we getting for, to not be able to say that, to not be able to say, our programs work? We've made it a priority to keep every program.
But are we doing that, really?
If we keep the world languages, I would
Oh,
suggest
if
that
you're
we
saying
would
we
do that. We would be
reinstate
able to
the
do that. So
French.
what's the cost? How much are we
So you're.
giving away here?
Oh,
I mean,
so
are we going from 5% increase to 5.1? If so, I'd say we should keep it so that we can say that and we can keep every program and guard it as closely as we possibly
So
can.
that doesn't have bennies in it.
FYI, it's already 5.1.
So it's about $25,000 plus benefits on that position.
So Elizabeth, you said you had figures that went along with this list.
In some
Number.
cases, I might not have all of them, but yeah. Some of them are difficult to place a dollar figure on, like there was one that was like, changing the estimate of HRAs budgeted by 25%. That'd be pretty hard to assign a dollar value to, but,
Can you
'cause it's a
tell
lot
us
of
what
money.
you know on these?
So which
figures?
ones are you looking for?
Well, you just said the world language was around 25,000?
Yeah, the salary
Oh,
itself
plus
is
benefits.
25,
Plus benefits.
plus benefits, and I'm not sure what
And
that person
taxes.
takes for that.
Now, how about the next one?
I wouldn't recommend adding back in positions that we don't
No.
need based on attrition.
No, I'm not
so-
saying that. I'm just
Okay.
curious how much it reduced
Dollar
the
values.
overall budget.
So
Right.
could we say what the bottom line budget was when we left last time and where the bottom line budget is this time? Because that would be everything on this list totaled
Oh,
up,
yep.
rather than going line by line.
Sure, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
prefer that.
So I asked if you'd like that. Now I have to actually
last
find
budget.
it, but it would be.
Well, so the other, well, here, look. So this is the grand total of all of those changes from here.
Well, that would
That
be,
doesn't correlate with this list. That correlates with both lists.
Both lists, okay, gotcha.
Right.
Yep, yep, yep.
well, so this, we should have those numbers as well.
4, 12, 10, 18, bottom line.
I know, we do somewhere. So this is 22,174,504, correct?
My thing went to sleep.
And I believe on December 10th, we were looking at 22,5.
22,553.
Yes. 22,553,633.
22,
So we're looking at 380. Is that right?
would you
That
say
makes sense.
25,
That makes sense, yep.
5?
22.
That's about 200.
22,553,633.
It's about 380 between the original strategic budget to where we are now.
Oh, that was the original.
Yeah,
No, well, we had seen one at one time that was 22,791, so,
That would have been the
That-
first one.
that would have been the original.
original,
On
right.
11/27. So the difference between 12/10, or since,
since last
So
time.
which two are we comparing?
There's the three numbers.
I think it's the 380 is from original to here.
Yep,
It's
22,
and that's what I had on the
5,
sheet, I think, was 380,
minus
379
22,
something something.
379 something.
4.
Which we were looking for a 500,000, but then we had.
Well, we already had some changes
Right.
in there before that, that
Right.
came up to
So
that 500,000.
Right.
Added up to the.
We actually went lower overall,
You did.
lower than 500,000, we really did. But what we also found is every time we would reduce something, I'd have to recalculate all your revenue. Because
Right.
your revenue changes, if you reduce a sped position, that's gonna change your revenue.
Yep.
And so it didn't necessarily bring you as much credit towards getting to your goal.
Yep. she
Um,
got it.
Yeah. So,
Already did the math.
Right.
It's still
is it
379.
379? I should have given that number. There it was, right there.
Is it fair to, I mean, if I divide $30,000 for French, let's say, by the 22 million, that's about a tenth of a percent? So we're talking,
Yeah, at some point, though, we're gonna not
Yeah.
have the debt service credits to.
would that be
True.
like 5% versus 5.1% to
Yeah,
answer
you
John's
could do it
question?
that way, or you could also think about it in the manner of taking that $30,000 and dividing it by your equalized pupil number. How much would it raise you? Per kid.
Well, if the salary is 25, it's gonna be more like
Plus benefits.
40 or 50.
Right.
Just, I mean,
Okay.
if you're
They have
gonna,
health insurance, it would be.
yeah, if there's health insurance
Yeah.
and payroll taxes and,
And
Yep.
it's
Sorry.
2%, 0.2%.
Forgive me if I missed December's meeting, and
Or-
maybe you've already gone over this, but first of all, I want to state that I think sports is incredibly important for all students. However, I feel like the last couple of years, I've been seeing the sports, the co-curricular activity continue to rise. Between 17, 18, and 18, 19, between 16, 17, and 17, 18. So anyway, we increased our co-curricular activities by almost 30%. And this year it raised by almost 9%. And I get it that in some ways it's related, even though we have had a 30% reduction in our kids over a long time, some of those costs are going to remain the same regardless of how many kids we have. But I know we're going to have less uniforms. I know we're going to have less. I don't understand why it keeps on going
So
up. The other
part of-
question I have is the admin tech services. That's another one that last year, or the last period, the increase was almost 30%, and this period it's 12. So, I was looking, I did some looking at the last report she sent us, which is the conglomeration of the numbers.
Or if you look at this one.
It is, excuse me, that,
So she has the comparison across.
right, so, I mean, does everybody understand what
it's
where
in-
I am?
Yes.
Hang on.
Okay, so can
So
Elizabeth
one of
address?
the reasons why I think the athletic department, you've seen changes over time, is that we're now going to a district-wide athletic model, and we're actually truly going there. And so that's actually bringing equity between your schools, because before, some of those schools didn't really have, like, the athletic department overseeing their athletics happening in their schools, you know, and there was very little money budgeted on those schools to do anything with athletics. It was, you know, all volunteer coaches and all kind of parent-run type of thing. So it's actually bringing equity to the other smaller schools to be able to have some athletics and some oversight in that. So that's part of the athletics. Then the second question, the technology department, one of the things we did this year that was a little bit different in your budget is we put in the expenses as they are in total expected to be for things like telephone service or any wiring projects that we had approved. E-rate actually gives you money as a discount. They'll either give it to you as a discount on your bills, or they'll give you the revenue. And it seems like consistently in your history, they've been giving you the revenue instead of discounting your bills. So that causes a problem in our current year where the bills are coming in higher and we don't have enough budgeted because we budgeted for the net value of those credits to go against it before. And now we're budgeting for the revenue instead. So we're budgeting the E-rate revenue to come in and offset, but we're budgeting the higher amount in your expense lines in technology so that we can actually pay the bills and not have that expectation. Because we're only approved to spend money that's in our total bottom line budget. And so if we budget net of the revenue, we have trouble paying the phone bill.
I don't have a problem with the accounting,
Yep.
changing things
Nope.
around.
But that's why
Consistency
it's
is good,
but
but
that's why it's not really technically as high as what
She's
you
saying
can
that's,
see.
that accounts
If you
for the
only
tech
look at the
admin,
expense
or the
side,
admin tech.
you're
So
not
you're
seeing-
saying that the entire 12%
No.
increase is
No, I'm
because
just
of
saying
revenue?
some of it is. I'm just saying
Right,
some of
and
it.
how much do we, I mean, like, again, this is the third year in a row I've seen tech services go up, and
Well, and there is also the other piece that technology, we've been trying to bring technology onto the district for a while, and we've discovered over the last, and it's been a process over the last couple of years since consolidation, we've found things budgeted on the schools that really belonged in technology. So in some cases, it's also a cost shift where we're taking things out of, say, the regular program budget and putting them into technology because they're really a technology item. So there's also that. And that's happened over the last couple of years.
so the co-curricular activity increase is $30,000. If we
1,400.
level funded the co-curricular activity, we could reinstate French and have no effect on the budget.
So I might just sort of encourage you to think more in terms of getting to a number that you feel comfortable with, rather than maybe picking out things in the budget line by line and prioritizing. So if we had a different dollar amount, I hear where you're coming from, and I'm not making this statement about the French program specifically, but if the administration had a different bottom line amount, they may determine that something in this list actually is a bigger priority than something else. So I think, you see where I'm going? Like, to pick one thing and say, so I think maybe more of a general statement would be, you're not comfortable with a budget that brings forward a program cut. That's fair, right? But I think.
A program cut and a significant increase in the co-curricular activities. And not only the first year of significant increase, but we've had several years of significant increase in the curricular activities, the co-curricular activities. And we're cutting French. And I'm very uncomfortable with that. Thank you for giving me the language.
So,
I
Lori?
mean, one thing to think about is the student population that each of those things serves too.
Right.
I mean, fairly, we're talking 23 kids, and I'm not knocking French at all, but the co-curricular budget basically covers every student in our schools.
And I'm not arguing that
I
either.
know, I'm
I
just
don't
pointing that
but I
out.
really don't understand how it is. We've had that kind of a significant increase in our co-curricular activity, and we have had a significant reduction in our students. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. And we haven't added any sports, have we?
What's the?
Go ahead, George.
I mean, you're saying there's a percentage increases though, but if you go from $1 to $2, that's 100% increase.
So the budget this year is 390,000. Last year it was 360,000. And the year before it was, I don't have that information. I guess I can't guess. So,
It is significant.
yeah.
So that's the shift to the district-wide that
Right.
Elizabeth already.
That was the
Yeah,
shift.
but, so are you saying that we're spending $30,000 more on our grade school kids than we did in the past?
Yeah, because now
So-
we have a district-wide director that is overseeing
Right.
all of that.
So you also have to understand that there's salaries encumbered in this section too,
course.
right? It's not just uniforms and
Yeah.
and balls.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we have contractual obligations.
I understand.
So-
I understand.
So my point, though, is that if we were to take away that 30,000, it would probably, in essence, be a program cut in the co-curricular area, because where's
Well,
it,
we
where's
don't
it gonna, where's it gonna come from?
We don't
Right?
know.
No, we don't.
know, right? I mean. we
But
don't know.
it could be, though.
Right. My point still stands, that we have had 3 years of significant increases in our co-curricular budget, and
Or cost shifting in some cases. From the schools to the
Yeah, that definitely has happened.
central
what do you mean?
office. Some
There
of
was-
these,
there
some
were
of the things that
stipends.
are listed on line,
Well, there's a $200,000 drop in
1400.
co-curricular for the high school,
right,
because it got moved over to
Well, it got
Central.
moved to the district.
Right.
Yeah. So it's, unless you had unless you're looking at the one that we sent out
There's
that
an
has the.
$800 increase for Addison,
Total.
and there's 4,500, no, that's, it just got shifted around, so the individual schools are pretty much
It's all
flatlined or
combined now.
big losses on their budgets, because it all got changed, and so when you look at just the 1,400 line on page 2, it's massive, but the 1,400 lines under the individual schools have all
Yeah, I think she's
shrunk.
looking at this one. She's looking at the one where we're comparing, that I sent out after, and I emailed it to you all.
Got it.
It's a
Where
total-
all the 1,400s are squashed together, and there's a $30,000 overall increase.
So it's the net of all the schools and all the
Yeah.
changes.
Yeah, this one nets them all out.
Got it.
but I was talking about the previous years. There was some shifting there.
2580, which is technology.
If you're looking
So-
for a priority, I would suggest
71,000, 2580.
I would argue that especially if it's at 5 or 5.1 or 5.1.5, it's at 5. That's not 4. It's at 5. It's already pretty high. And I think we should guard our programs as best as we possibly can. Moving down this path of losing programs is just not the place we want to be. We don't, our language is the kind of stuff that parents talk about in the elementary school, like, why aren't we having a French class? Well, we'll get it in the high school or something like that. I mean, it's just like, keep our programs. I would argue that we should keep all of our programs, and we should encourage this next budget to come back to us with enough money that allows us to go to the voters and say, we made really tough choices, we made cuts in positions, but we were able to keep all of our high-quality instructional and curricular and social programs that benefit our community directly and our students. That's a good argument.
So you'd like to see the administration come back on the 23rd with a budget that does not make program cuts?
I would suggest
that
that
saying
should
we
be
wanna
a
make it
board
higher?
priority.
Does that mean we are going with a higher number, or are we taking
Yeah,
away
what's-
something
what's
else
the-
in its place?
What's the number?
I'm not, that's, I think, more for you all to decide
No, I
what's
think
best.
No,
Sheila
that's
said
actually
we
for
need
us
to
to
know the number.
decide.
We need the guidance.
That work we've
The
already
number is
done.
actually for us to decide.
We brought
You know.
this is like
This is what we did.
our best and final.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where we would go next to
Yeah.
find something to offset any of these things. Obviously, that's how we got where we are even
Yeah.
with these
right.
recommendations, right? Like, we're,
I mean, okay, I would just, like, I'm not sure why I can't say, I would like to argue that we should have a budget number that doesn't cut programs.
Well, that just means you want to increase by that. That's
So you wanna
fine, you can
increase-
say that.
We sent the administration and said, cut $500,000. We can say, all right, only cut $450,000.
Right.
Okay, sure.
Okay. George had a point.
You know, I understand where you're coming from, John, but you gotta face the reality of the declining enrollment and the rise in taxes. And you just can't sustain what you want to indefinitely. You have to face the fact that cuts have to be made. I think that the administration has come back with a figure that's as close as they can get it, and it's still a 5% increase. And why are we increasing in these times? We shouldn't be. I really think that they've done their darndest to come up with a good budget. It may not be as smooth as silk. There's some bumps and gravel in the road. But I think that they've worked really hard to come up with something that works, and we should endorse it.
So you're supportive of
I
this
am.
proposal?
So,
What
The
did
other
you- whoop,
thing-
Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Elizabeth, go ahead.
So
Sorry,
I just calculated, basically adding that back in, it increases your per pupil spending number. You know how I said we're $220 below the threshold by using our credits? It changes that number by $50. So it decreases it back down below 100, 170 below. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we are using 100% of our surplus money towards this $480,000. We will not have $480,000 coming out of this year to put towards the following year's budget. I just
And we're
wanna-
not contributing anything to a capital or capital.
We actually are.
Oh.
There's $50,000 in this budget built in. We're not having to vote separately on it, but when we did all of your changes for reducing the special projects, we put in a fund transfer of $50,000 to your capital improvements, because that was talked about at one of the meetings
Right.
and indicated that we should be putting something in there every
Right.
year.
That was
It's tax
And that's
agreed on by the
And it's
voters.
in there, yeah.
So what you're,
It is going to get voted on by the voters.
Yes, but in your budget,
Right.
not as a
part of
separate
the
ballot
overall
item.
budget, yes.
And we don't have to do that? We don't have to we can do a capital improvements funds through the budget?
Yes, you can. As long as you get it into your budget and you approve it that way, and then it's already in your budget. If you don't put it in that way, then you end up having to have a separate article to use surplus dollars towards
It
a
also takes
capital
it out of our
improvement.
tax rate calculation.
Right.
And it also gives the
When you're ready.
folks the
Christina's waiting.
opportunity,
That's okay.
right, to vote it down. We could carve that out.
You
That's
could.
$50,000.
Christina.
I did just want to point out that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, but we did eliminate French once before. We did not offer it at some point in time over the last 5 years because of low enrollment in that particular.
Yeah, I think at that time we phased it out and we didn't offer French 1 for 1 year, but, yeah, for the same reason, but we phased it out or attempted to.
John, did you?
Well, I mean, I'm just trying to think through, like, how do we win a budget here? Like, we will lose if we don't have parents. And we will have a harder time of getting parents on board with the budget if we say we're cutting programs.
But we're just eliminating one option in a language arts
Yeah.
program.
That's
We're
right.
not
Cutting
cutting a
all the languages.
language arts program, which is, I realize I'm on your side, but something's got to give, right? We've got to do.
What are we giving for? We're giving for a 0.02% increase from what we already have. You see what I'm saying? We're negotiating
Well, it's more
for a
about the
budget.
I think it's more about the
to-
tax rate than the percentage increase.
Percentage increase so that it's going to go up from 0.83 to 0.87.
So the next thing also, though, that happens, there's actually two other things that I thought of. Your debt credits decrease next year when you build your budget for the following year because you're dropping one of your bonds for your high school. That'll be paid off, which means your debt credits for this per pupil shrink. And then, what was the other thing? Oh, the 2-cent incentive drops.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, we have to look
So
down
we
the
don't wanna
road,
have a
too.
cliff.
It's down the road.
There's
It's
gonna
not
be-
just the
And our
current
and
year.
our our pupils are gonna go down.
Like
They drop
another-
again. Yeah.
And our costs, and our bus transportation,
Goes
and our
up a
health.
little, but not as much as it
Who
did
knows
this
what's gonna
year.
happen with healthcare?
It'll go up 3% next
Yeah.
year.
So,
Quickly, because Diana has actually.
so we've got 3 things that are gonna happen next year. A 2-cent decrease in our tax credit. We're gonna have the loss of one of the bonds as far as a credit against our figures. And we're gonna have a $500,000 increase because of the
Automatically,
fact that
no
we don't
surplus.
have the surplus to plug in there.
Right.
So we're looking at a substantial increase in what it's gonna cost us next year over what we're doing this year without increasing this any more than it is already.
And we lose any control over healthcare.
Right.
Not that we.
Not that
really
we
have
had
any
much
control
anyway,
anyway.
but.
That's why I'm thinking, dollar-wise, it might behoove us to think about where is it that we would be recommended to cut in order to put that French back in, if that's really what the board would want to do, rather than increasing the budget total.
Well, and is there a guarantee French goes back in? If we find $50,000 and give it back to
I
administration, is
think
that?
administration's going to follow the lead
Yeah, I
of
mean, if
what,
Yeah,
what the
but is
board
that gonna
wants,
be the
yeah.
best place to put that 50? Or are there other
Well,
things that you would prioritize?
I
There
think
you go.
And
I
I'm
would
not,
want-
I'm
I
not
would
asking for an
wanna-
answer, I'm just saying
Right.
you might not.
I think that's a fair question.
That might not be
Right.
what the administration would prioritize.
Right.
Diana?
So I would really like us to look hard and it may not be for this budget, at the way we transport our kids. Somebody brought up the idea at a community engagement committee meeting about corridor busing, where you don't, maybe we could eliminate the number of miles, like if you have consolidated bus stops. We're legally not required to bus kids, and I think we need to bus kids, but can we get creative around our busing? Can we think about, instead of having these increased costs year after year?
So we're
Twenty
in,
for next
We
year.
have 2 more years. of
we're in
contract.
year 3 of a 5-year
Yeah,
contract?
we expire in 2022.
So, yes, definitely a great conversation, I think. I don't think we can change the contract we have that substantially until it's up.
So
but
looking
yeah,
into the
definitely,
future, we
definitely.
need to maybe, because that's,
Huge.
Do a study on it, yeah.
It's a big cost.
and so maybe a child, our grandparents said, I walked 5 miles to school. Well, maybe they walked to a bus stop, or, I don't know.
Yeah.
So,
Door to door.
I have a real
uh,
quick question.
okay, go ahead.
Last year, we didn't budget for a $480,000 surplus, obviously.
Right.
We got one. Yep. I'm just wondering why, we're all saying we're not gonna have one this year.
Well, we level funded
But
your
we-
budget, even with salary increases and everything else in it. We level funded last year to this year. So now we're in a new year with higher salaries, higher benefits, and the same bottom line budget dollar, actually $10,000 less than that year before. And if you look at your current financial reports, you've got $700,000 of unencumbered funds right now, and you're in January. We're not gonna have 480 of that. That's my
Prediction.
prediction.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Okay, so,
That was a scary number, wasn't it?
Burst that bubble, right?
so we need to, we have an action item on our agenda tonight to approve a budget. We do not need to do that tonight. We can postpone that until the 23rd. We can take a vote tonight, or we can postpone to the 23rd. It needs to be approved. We need to have something approved when we leave the meeting on the 23rd, though. If there are specific requests of the administration to come back with something different on the 23rd, I think we should postpone the vote, or we would obviously have to postpone the vote. If there aren't specific request to come back with something new, you know, I
Could you
guess
take a
we
straw
could
poll?
vote, we could to a straw poll. Mhm. I mean,
I'm
I
Also
hear,
approving a dollar amount too, so we
We're
could
approving
still
a dollar
approve a
amount,
dollar
so
amount, and then you could
we could
still
still-
have conversations about what is the priority to fund. And I think that's what Sheila was getting at earlier, is like, we don't necessarily have to
Right.
say it's going to be the French teacher, or it's going to be athletics, or what it is going to be. We can have that discussion after, if we decide it's not the dollar value that you want risen. But it sounded like John was indicating, let's rise the dollar value. So that's the part we need to know what we need to change.
so how are people, I mean, we can just go,
Can we tell them to take the 50,000 out and put it so that it's?
the 50,000 to the
Yeah,
capital?
so that the 50,000 for the capital improvement fund goes on the budget stays the same, that 50,000 line item goes away, that $50,000 goes somewhere else, it spreads among other things, and then we put on the ballot the $50,000.
You can't put it on the ballot because you don't have surplus dollars. We're putting your surplus dollars 100% against this.
No,
If
not
I put if I put the $50,000 in your budget, then it's in your tax base, right? It's in your expenditure base, and it's in there, and it gets approved by the voters by way of approving your budget. If I take the $50,000 out of your budget, then you're just not raising that money anymore. I can't just put in on the ballot and ask for a fund transfer on a separate line item besides the budget to transfer $50,000. Where would I take it from?
You'd have to take 50,000
I'd have
of
to
the
take it
surplus
back
as
out of the
well,
surplus,
which would
and
make
that does the same thing.
$100,000 net.
Right. It
Difference.
does the
I'm
same thing.
asking that this is additional tax.
Oh.
I'm talking about additional, so I'm saying there's $50,000 in a line item in that budget.
Yep.
We leave that budget number the same. We take that $50,000 and don't put it into a capital improvement fund.
But instead, we fund that. Instead.
So we're not making any contribution?
Or it's like an addition.
Right, we're not making a
If I finish
contribution.
my sentence, I tell you that, just like we used to do with the high school, we have a capital improvement fund vote.
That's a separate line item, is what you're
It's a
saying.
separate line
separate
item, and the
article. That's how it
taxpayers
used to be
approve
done.
it or they don't.
The
And it goes into our tax dollars.
Right, but the separate articles generally come from
The
surplus
separate
funds.
article has to come from the
In the
surplus.
high school, we did capital improvement funds on the ballot.
But it affected our tax rate.
Yes, I'm
It was-
saying that. I'm saying that.
So there would be no difference.
So that's not
between-
any different than putting it in here, though. It's not having any
Except the
effect or
voters get to
difference.
vote on it separately.
Correct.
Right, that's the
George-
only thing it does. But it doesn't change your bottom line in your tax base, though.
It actually makes it higher. But what I'm suggesting makes it higher.
It makes it higher.
Yes.
She's asking.
What I'm suggesting makes it higher.
Would increase everything 50,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's the budget.
Go ahead.
And then here's
That was the point.
Oh, I think I'm starting to get
Different
what she's
words.
saying.
Okay.
But it'd be up to the taxpayers to.
Right, they're
raise
making
that
the
additional
decision.
50 or not through their votes for
Right.
specifically earmarked
So
for
it would make the
capital.
budget, you would lower the budget by 50
No.
and
No.
then.
Keep the budget the same.
No, it just give us
Budget would
50,000
stay
more
the same.
dollars in our budget.
It would be
to
50.
use.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
additional
But it
50.
could go up or down and not touch the other, so you'd have the budget amount,
But-
and then you'd have this additional.
But we
The impact
identified,
is the same.
we identified that we got into trouble because we did not have those capital funds available, and that's why we end up having to have bond issues. And if we pay as we go, then we end up not having to have the bond issue. We don't have to pay all that interest expense on it. And we're making a much better business decision to put that money in there every year.
So if that article was voted down,
Then you wouldn't have that money.
have- we
The
wouldn't
other
have any
item that I'm
contribution.
concerned about by doing it that way and doing it separately in a separate article is every year when we submit, so as soon as we approve a budget at this level, we put in a preliminary budget to the state of Vermont. They calculate what your education spending is on that. Taking it out of this budget and putting it in a separate article, we can no longer submit that 50,000 towards that education spending. And so it's not gonna look like it's part of our budget.
but she doesn't want to take 50,000 out.
state.
She wants to add 50,000 in a separate article.
In addition to this?
Yeah.
Yes.
that's what she's suggesting, yeah,
She wants to eliminate the line item but leave the money.
right.
But where are you gonna get that money from if you can't raise it from your taxes? Cause I can't submit it on a budget.
Because the budget number doesn't change. You're still raising
Where are you
21
getting it
million.
from? Where are
Wait,
you
what do you
getting the
mean the
extra
budget number doesn't
$50,000?
That, you're still gonna have it in your budget,
she's talking
but you
about-
aren't having that line item. The line item is
Total
gonna go
budget,
away.
including that
The money is gonna be someplace
And
else.
report it to
Ed
the state
fund-
of
ed
Vermont
fund
as
budget
education
wouldn't change.
spending if I do that. And so we will not generate tax money for it. If I can't put it in that education spending number when we submit the budget to the state, I will not be able to generate tax money to pay for that 50,000.
Well, we've done it in the past, and so are you saying that some law has changed that we can't do
No,
this?
the law hasn't changed, but I think that it hasn't necessarily been done the way it's supposed to. That's why you're ending up seeing like,
Is
I
that
think it
why
was
we didn't
last
have
year,
those
you had the
transfers?
loss of $87,000 on your education spending in your revenue. Things like that, because what was being put forth in that budget projection had other transfers that were beside and not in the budget. And we can't submit a budget to the state of Vermont that generates tax revenue if it's not in this, which is why I put the line item in here instead.
So anytime you have a separate vote, separate line voting for any kind of thing besides the budget, it does not go into education spending
Right,
calculation.
you have to use surplus money if you have it to fund it.
Would
That
like to
was
see that in
my-
writing or something, because this is so unlike what we've been doing for years. So I would like to hear something from somebody.
Just
because
because
we
you've been
certainly
doing it for
included-
years doesn't mean it's right.
Right.
Well, I don't
We
know if
certainly
it's
included-
specifically in writing. All I know is that when I submit the budget, I can't put that extra $50,000 in against your education spending. And the only reason why we were able to, we voted on a separate budget item to put money in a transfer last year was because we put it out of surplus money.
I understand.
Right, and I think that's how I've seen them written, is it's either from surplus or it's for a bond.
If it's generating from
Others.
tax
Not the way
money, you
the high
have
school
to have
did
it in your
I'm
budget.
telling you, we had line items,
I
and so did
believe you.
ACS.
I
And we
believe you.
were buried under a lot of problems for many years,
Yeah,
so it's quite
that's right.
possible that it was being
Right.
done.
I'm not
So-
saying it's not, I'm not saying it's not possible. I'd
So-
just like to know. I would like that checked out,
Yeah,
to be
I don't know
sure
who I
that we
would
can't do
verify
that.
it with, but
Well,
I
it
know
sounds
I
like
can't
our
submit it
business
to budget.
manager's
Probably-
telling us that we can't do it exactly that way. We could take 50,000 of surplus and the 50,000 out, which would impact this by 100,000.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then have a separate vote on
Yes.
putting 50,000 from surplus into the capital fund.
Right,
And then,
yes, you could do that, yeah.
and then the voters would
But-
have say in that.
But then,
piece.
if you do that and the voters turn it down, then you can't put that
No.
50,000, it's
general.
kind of in limbo,
Then it
right?
sits there in fund balance and you've got a surplus sitting there
hopefully
of
a surplus.
$50,000, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I was gonna go around and just see where people kind of were at with this, and, I'll start with you, Mark. So how are you feeling about this? Do you think we should vote tonight? Do you have specific requests for administration to come back with something different?
It's a rough budget. I don't mean loose, I just mean it's hard. I think we're probably about as close as we're gonna get. I think there's enough questions though, and we do have the time to wait. I mean, the 23rd is the hard and fast date in order to get all the legal dates done right, but if there's still some things that we might be able to figure out and verify whether or not we can do the 50,000, or figure out how to, then let's take the time that we have and just verify that this is as good as it gets.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Will we have better information from the state if we wait?
Different.
Just different. Really better. It could go either way, and it could change after we vote.
Right.
The only thing I'll add too is that the packet for the next meeting goes out Friday, so we're really just talking about between today and Friday, before we would have
We would
something.
so we would have to have guidance
Yeah.
tonight to be able to do
There's
it
Not
for
a
you.
ton of time, right.
Right.
And no meetings scheduled for this purpose.
Well,
Ooh,
Diana, go ahead.
well, that piece of information.
I mean, it's just challenging, like, to get everyone
Yeah.
together with
Yeah.
enough time to really do, but, I mean, we'll do it, but it's
Right.
just adding that.
Diana, how are you feeling about this?
I guess I'm ready to vote.
Christina?
I guess I am too. I just, in 4 or 5 days, I don't see much changing. I feel like we've already probably put the administration through the ringer by having to sit through all this and get to this point tonight, so I would be ready to vote.
They've all been doing their regular jobs on top of
Well, this is part of their
doing this
regular
day
job,
and
to be
hour.
fair.
This is our work. We're happy to do whatever the board would like us to do. Truly, we are.
You gave us a good number, we should vote it in.
I'm happy to wait until the 23rd because that is my personality.
We know.
I feel like we're all among friends here. I would be curious if we could split the difference. I understand that a position is 50,000 when you add in fringe, but if we added a little bit, if we add a little bit here and took a little bit there, would that make it more palatable? Could the administration figure out, add a little bit more, not much more? I get the larger point that George. What's that?
Find the money, keep the position, find the money through adding a little to the bottom line.
I'm curious,
finding
I
a
would
little-
like to know, I recognize that John's position that it's important to maintain programs. I also recognize that French, for example, has been the least enrolled language for a long time. And I don't know that that'll change, and if next year we're in the same position, French would be the first one to go. Because it has the least, it serves the fewest number of students. So, I may vote that way next week too, but if we've got another week and you've got 2 meetings, because I know you're doing nothing else. And if you don't, then I get that. If you don't feel like, if you come back to us next week and say, you really, we got the board's guidance, but we can't. So in your straw poll, that was more words than you needed. I apologize.
I know where you are. Lori,
I'm with Tom.
you want to
and
wait?
John.
Okay. You,
Yeah, I mean, it's approximately a 5% increase. Right now, is it 5.1? What is it?
It's 5.09
5.09.
is what I calculated.
All right, so that's not 5%,
5.0
that's 5.1.
It's a little higher than 5.
To keep all, I'm not, I don't know about French, I don't know the difference, you know the difference, you all know what languages to have, but I am very interested in our programs, and I think parents and families make choices about going to different schools when they know that there are programs that are there, right, and we have the full slate, and we can argue fully.
well, we don't have Chinese, we don't have,
We
there
have
are
a
a
full
lot of
slate.
languages that we don't
True.
have currently.
So that's why I'm not,
I majored in French in college,
That's
so
why
I'm not.
That's why I'm not here to, I'm not jealously trying to
like
argue for French. I value that, that'd be great. Chinese would be great too, but
Mandarin
keeping
or-
programs. So if it's so I would say wait, so I can keep
Okay.
arguing this.
Got it. Lori?
I'm ready to vote.
Okay. George? All right. All right, so it seems like we have at least 4 folks that want to wait, so I think we should probably just wait. I
So
mean, I know.
wait means though.
Right,
Not just wait,
well,
we
this-
aren't just waiting. and
No,
see.
no,
Looks different
no.
next week.
So I guess we are asking for a budget that does not cut programming.
Okay.
And if that means that the budget has to increase, could we put a
close can you
cap on
push
that
it without
increase?
going
I
down?
personally don't want to see a budget that goes above that penalty,
Where we are.
including our
It
debt,
It won't, it'll eat up
including our excess.
$50. It'll eat up $50 more of your credit.
So we'll,
That's what it would do,
still
if
won't
we
get
added the whole thing.
double taxed. Right.
No,
So we'll try that
Or
first.
Can we ask
help
the
us go to
principals?
go to the parents and to the voters and say, this is not a cut in a program because of a financial, because we're desperate to cut a little bit here and there, but that we think that our students is better off. We can put more resources into another place. If you can help us
Right.
make that case, that's a different story than, we had to cut some programs.
I'll tell you, my concern is long-term. My concern is not so much this budget. This one, I think, looks like a rose compared to where we're gonna be headed in the next couple of years, and I'm
Actually,
really,
it's not long-term,
really,
it's.
it's 1 year, 2 years out, right? This is short-term, you're right.
But
Yeah.
I think one thing for consideration to that end is the fact that we're trying to align our schedules with the other neighboring districts. And I think that there's a case to be made for strategizing regionally now that we're all gonna be in the same boat, which is down to the program level, right? So
Like if another
if we
school-
can't keep French, can someone else keep French? You know,
Right.
we'll keep German, they don't have German, right? And can we be kind of strategic about those offerings so that we're not truly, you know, losing that option for
That is,
students?
as far as I can tell, our best bet for optimizing programming for our students.
We don't have a choice, really.
Yes.
In the long run, you know, we may have a choice for next year.
So the reason we haven't done that, more of that, like utilizing our neighborhood schools, I understood is about the money,
Money, what money?
the students' money. Like, we don't send anybody to Middlebury necessarily to do German or to do Chinese or whatever. And it has something to do with the money transferring with the student. That's what have
Well,
always.
we don't want our kids to enroll in
Yeah,
another
that would only be
school
if
and
they
not
enrolled.
enroll here any longer.
Right, that's not what I'm trying to, what I'm
To
trying
take
to
a
ask
class,
is.
to go
taking
take
a
a class
class.
down.
Right, and,
Right.
right, so that's what I'm asking.
Right,
What are the,
so- So through Act 77 flexible pathway, we could construct some sort of flexible pathway for a student, you
that
know,
could include the other two
that could
schools?
include some way to access learning that's available in a neighboring district, and they're still our student, we are not losing them.
We might gain some of their students.
Maybe it would
The
be
other
through the
thing, I
computer or
mean,
something.
We
like
don't have
e-learning.
this currently, we don't have any VTVLC instructors in our school, I do not think.
No.
Yeah, so if you become a VTVLC certified teacher, that means you can teach into the consortium of virtual learning courses available. And for every course instructor that becomes certified and teaches a course, like say German or something like that, that other people might be interested in taking, we get 25 free seats for our students to take a course through some other neighboring or not neighboring district.
Right.
But.
And what obstacles stand in our way of doing that? Are there obstacles?
There is a contractual issue potentially. There's a statement in our contractual agreement that speaks to reducing a position and then offering it as an online course. But I would say statewide, that's not really representative of present day learning opportunities or Act 77, you know, for our students who would be, you know, would benefit from an opportunity to be able to take courses. But they could take courses that we haven't previously offered, because then that wouldn't then fall under the contractual, right? So we've never had Chinese, right?
Right.
So maybe technically speaking,
Exactly.
kids could take a
Right.
course.
I want to just ask if there's anyone in our audience that has anything to say about this budget discussion, or principals, staff, visitors.
You probably guessed, I know the administration knows who I am, but, so I'm the, not 50,000, the 22.5, that's my job, and this has been refreshing to hear, you know, the challenges that you're facing, and I really appreciate the consideration for not cutting programming. I think I'm here because the community said at the bitter end one summer that they wanted the program to come back. And so, you know, I have been naively attempting to build a program so that, but it is true, we have less enrollment than we could have with a bigger school. I will tell you that my particular language is often chosen due to heritage issues, because we live in a community that has a lot of, you know, this is the first year that I had, I think, 5 that had all family members that go by their historical French family name, that they, you know, so when I was teaching family, that was not even an issue. So anyway, I also have 2 students that have taken language classes online. So this is lacking interpersonal connection. It's less than ideal. The other thing just to bear in mind if you're proposing, and she is fantastic, the Middlebury French teacher. She was Vermont Foreign Language Teacher of the Year. She likely has full classes. And how long does it take to get there? Hang on, is she Mount Abe? That's who we would be trading with, right?
Is it George?
Yeah,
Yes.
but so, that's 45 minutes, 40 minutes on a bus? I don't know how does that actually work with kids' schedules? So if you're speaking about languages, just think about what is that? Communication online and then the bus. So those are things to think about. And
Thank you.
Anyway, I appreciate everybody's comments and I do understand the fiscal reality.
Thank you.
In
Yes?
fact, as they speak
Oh,
French
wait.
north of the border.
Okay, I'm gonna let Nancy go because I had opened it up that way. Go
I
ahead.
would just echo some of the things that Diana brought up about French, the heritage of the community. I'm concerned about talking about the future classes with mixing with Mount Abe and Middlebury at this point, and I know we're aligning our schedule, but I don't know how and when that will happen. She's 35%. It was dropped down several times, the French, so it's going to be the lowest language chosen, for one, because the class isn't offered. But I know that German is definitely our most popular. And I'm not arguing which one to offer. I'm just saying that there are kids that have a personal learning plan that includes French. Also, Middlebury is going international baccalaureate, which is a different, I don't know, I can't speak to that. I have read a little about it, but not a lot. And I don't know how that works either. I'm involved with the dual enrollment. I don't even know what I would have to do to be one of the Vermont Learning teachers. I've never gotten information about that. I did do what the Vermont, whatever I'm trying to say, you know what I am. Dual enrollment. I went through whatever they needed to be able to do that. I don't think that people are against it. I just don't think it's been promoted to what would happen with that. And I know we are moving forward. I, of all people, have seen many, many changes in education as I've come along. And I don't think people are against it. It's just, what do we do for our kids now that have plans? And that's one thing I'm concerned about. That's one thing I'm concerned about with the math program also, with changing to the every other day. I have very strong reluctance to kids not being able to go through math the way they have been in the past.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to add to Nancy's comment on the International Baccalaureate. That means that they have put language at the elementary level.
Yes.
And so that is just something else to consider, is that for our department, we did make a proposal that we are pretty much the only school that I am aware of that has no middle level world language offering. And there's critical brain development going on in that point that makes language an important thing that we should be offering. Anyway.
I actually did a whole statewide study last year for my former district on who offers what. I didn't do every single school, but I did a sampling. So there may be more than you think that don't offer it at the middle level, but I don't disagree. But I think that critical learning, the optimal time frame is actually much younger.
Actually, they just came out with a new study that said that it extended it to age 15, which is still prior to high school, mostly, but yes.
I just wanted to know, Sheila, how close are we? Do we have a timeline for the meshing of schedules?
Oh, our schedule is,
Do you mean aligning the schedule with the other schools?
Yes.
We're ready to go.
Next year.
Everybody,
Next year.
this,
Yes.
starting July
yeah,
1.
the difference is the length of the school
Starting
day.
August 26th.
There is a difference there.
Right, I mean, I was thinking fiscal year,
Yes.
sorry.
I mean, we'll be tweaking the bell schedule, which is how we arrange classes, but the calendar, and the superintendents are working on the common in-service days, but the AB schedule, alternating schedule, will be aligned with both Middlebury and Mount Abe and the Career Center. In fact, Middlebury is making an important change at the mid-semester mark that they were running skinnies on the alternating day, so they would run through all 8. It's kind of technical, and they're moving to the alternating Wednesdays. So, and that's the schedule that we'll all have next year.
Okay, so we are running behind, so let's not get too far off topic. Thank you.
Those are the weeds. We're not gonna go there.
So, okay, so we're going to continue this conversation on the 23rd
You have what you need.
and then vote. So
I just
you're
wanna make
gonna,
sure before we moved on that you're like,
so
hold
the,
it.
so the administration's gonna come back likely with this same budget and another one that's likely somewhat higher. That does
Right,
not make any
right,
program cuts.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, really. You guys are amazing, and thanks for all
So now we will move on to the superintendent report.
So I put later on in the agenda, a time for discussion for you all to talk about the plan for restructuring, separate and aside, so that you're not reacting to something just in my superintendent's report. Because I think it's really important that the board have an opportunity to figure out what, ultimately, I think what the board really needs to figure out is what is our goal? What are we aiming for? What is our overarching North Star in any of this work? Because there's, what I was attempting to demonstrate at the last meeting was that there's just so many variables for our consideration in thinking about a restructuring plan going forward. That it's bigger than just do we close a school or keep them all open, right? And that we have to identify a goal and then reconfigure those options in such a way that we get closer to that goal. So in what I brought forward last time, I was using middle school as an example of some way that we could have the conversation about how all these variables would come together and help us achieve some sort of outcome. But I think to just generate a bunch of options without really being clear what we're trying to accomplish would just continue to be a frustrating conversation, at least from my point of view. If we were to all hop in a car with each other and say, great, which direction are we going? We'd probably need to know where are we actually trying to go first. And I think that might be the missing piece. So I think the board really needs to figure out what the goal is and what the timeline and what the process is for this work going forward, because there's a lot of questions. Is this an administrative-driven process? Is this a participatory process where we really want the community to be involved? Are we aiming to have a vote of the electorate at some point? Is the board going to make the decision? There's just a lot of things for us to think about and decide, and I think that it would just be beneficial for the board to have that conversation free and clear of some next iteration of a proposal. That's what I kind of came to. I did put together in this superintendent's report a modified timeline that backs everything out by 1 year, because it felt like the pressure of that deadline I proposed last time was just primarily being driven from the central office lease expiring, and I think we really need to decouple that. That shouldn't be the driver for making really significant facilities changes. It's a consideration, it's one of the factors, but it certainly shouldn't be the most important one. We could always decide to extend our lease for a year or make some other decision. So if we decouple that from this, I think it would give you more time. So I put that in there as a suggestion for consideration. And I also became aware that New England School Development Council is an organization that we have recently become members of. It's a small membership fee, and I learned that as part of that, they would produce for us these really fantastic enrollment reports and a special ed report every year. So it was a small price to pay to get this great enrollment data. And while I was looking at the things we get as members, I noticed they have a service, it's not free, where they actually help school districts or organizations figure out just what we're trying to figure out, best use for our facilities. So I put an inquiry out. Hopefully we'll hear back from them with a price, again, just for consideration. It's not going to be free is the problem, so we may not be able to afford it, but might we want to think about working with a consultant, I guess is the question for that. So, more questions, fewer answers, right? I didn't have more answers. I actually feel like I just have more questions for you all, but I really thought it might be good for you to just have a conversation a little bit later and then give me some absolute direction for what you think.
Can we ask you questions about this
Sure,
report? Okay,
sure.
so it just, on phase one, community engagement, committee engages with the community to generate initial ideas in spring of 19, but I feel like we've already done that.
Yeah, this was, meant through spring of 19. This was
Okay,
meant to be
okay,
this
great,
whole
'cause
year. Yeah.
You don't wanna do it
Quite
again?
sure.
I think that bullet 1 and 2 are things that we've already kind of started, whereas 3 is like, do we want to do that? And certainly 4 is what I'm asking you to do, really. Just the board needs to decide on a process and maybe even a committee structure for carrying this work over into next steps. Which would mean next school year, we're really looking at impacts and costs and community engagement, so that we could get to an actual proposal. And then that's the ultimate question, you know, are you going to go for a vote? If it's before July of 2021.
If it's on this timeline, yeah, if it's on this proposed timeline, we would require a vote of the elector, of the town, if there was a proposal to close the school.
I think you would, because if we would be implementing in the fall, that would mean that you would have agreed to a budget that supported a plan that you hadn't yet voted on. So that would be off. So you'd have to get the community to approve it, or I think you would be overstepping a bit.
Yeah, I
So
agree. Yes.
I agree with not having the central office lease being up drive it.
Yeah.
But that was a lot of really clear feedback we got in our community meetings, was the central office needs to get out, needs to get into some of the schools. So maybe even if we had a stopgap for a year of, part of the central office in one school and part of the central office someplace else. I mean, I just feel like that is responding to the community and what they're saying. So we might want to think about that.
So can we save this for the discussion?
Yeah.
At the end of the meeting tonight?
Yeah.
Anything else? I'll just hit the highlights of a few other things in here, if not.
Well, I would like you to talk to the water testing, please.
Okay, so that's changing the subject. So water testing is going to be like something we're only going to hear more about, I think, this year. The legislature's taking this up, and there's just a lot of chatter about this, and so rightfully so. Sue had already raised this, and maybe even more than just Sue, raised this as an issue last year. Where are we? Have we ever done this? So the issue is not the water that's coming into the school. That's already tested. It's once it's in our school and coming through all of our piping and so on and so forth, is there lead? Meanwhile, while there was all this chatter, Ken just sort of looked into it, determined that we had 40 sources in our buildings, either drinking fountains or water where we would prepare food. There were 40 in total. Each tap needs 2 tests. So each test was $12. So for about $1,000, he was able to go out and test all of those spouts, and it all came back without any concerns at all. So that's really good news, and I did link that here. So we are good to go in terms of that. There'll be other things I think we'll be encouraged to test as we go on down the line, radon, for example. But for now, I think we're ahead of the game with the lead.
Which is great news that none of our students have been drinking water with lead in it.
So I
Or
think
faculty.
maybe in terms of the facilities committee, maybe it would be good for us to determine how this lives in a long-term facility plan. How often should we test? You know, and kind of work that into a plan.
Tested, and we know that we're not putting in new.
I don't know if it changes over time. I don't know if it,
Not
I
if
don't
you're-
know.
I don't think so, but, yeah.
But a long-term testing plan is certainly something that.
Is probably good for not, like Sheila said, not just this, but also the
Probably
radon
all
and
kinds of things.
the asthma, you know, the air
Talk about-
quality
we
and
could
the,
talk about
yeah.
that, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I guess is that true? Once it's not gonna,
I think it's,
Well, unless we put in new water fountains and use
Or-
lead solder and they're bad solders.
could it happen if your pipes degrade?
that's what I guess I'm getting at.
I don't know.
really know.
I don't know.
It depends on where the water's, I mean, like what happened in Flint was they changed their water source.
Well, right,
Well, they stopped treating it to suppress.
And they stopped treating it.
Right.
Right.
And so then the lead pipes that were there started
Rusting out.
leaching into the water because they stopped the specific water treatment. Now, hopefully that's not an issue here, but.
right.
I
Well,
don't
we'll
know.
leave that to your committee.
And then the only other thing I guess I would really want to draw your attention to is the principal search process for the Ferrisburg search. We have our committee pretty much fully formed. We are just looking for a board member who might be willing to be on the committee.
Do we have a volunteer?
100%, I cannot do that.
And the dates in red are the ones that you'd absolutely have to be available for.
Lori?
Sure.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you
Laura.
very much.
I'll get you some
And you're
information
available for
about
those
that.
dates?
The fifth,
Red ones.
5th, the
The red ones?
The
27th,
red ones.
March 6th,
The
7th,
others are
and
I'll
just
make
12th.
ones that are
myself
happening.
available.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Listen to her. That's awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
The integrated field review seemed like that was a very positive report.
It was. I mean, I don't think that from the integrated field review, I don't think that we learned anything that we weren't expecting. But it was validating, I guess, to have people come in from the outside and give us great feedback about our kids. I think that's one thing we heard from everyone. But then also say, hey, yeah, this is something you probably want to continue to work on, or, you know, they sort of saw the same things that we saw. So that's validating, if nothing else. And having participated in an integrated field review elsewhere, I can say it wasn't awful. It was interesting. You know, it's always hard to be away for a whole day, but it was really interesting. I don't see this as a process that the state's going to stay committed to for very long because it's too labor intensive. And I don't know that anyone's coming out of it saying we are sold on that as a model for feedback from here on out.
So we'll change again.
It'll
likely.
change again, but it was good while it lasted.
There's a lot of value in going through those districts, being able to do a deep dive into documents and evidence that way. There really is. I went to Greater Rutland. It was really interesting. Yeah.
I went to Addison Central, right next door.
All right. Anything else for Sheila? Okay, we're going to move on to our action items. So,
Do you accept that we accept the minutes?
Second that.
any conversation or edits on the minutes from December 10th? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Abstain, I said it too. Abstain, okay. Okay, the bills and directors' orders.
I have those. We have.
Do we have a
two of
motion?
them.
Do we have a
Yes.
motion? Two motion, a motion?
So, you want to do them both?
Sure. Well, eventually, yes, however you want to do it.
Okay.
Sequentially,
We'll make
probably.
a motion for both of them. Why don't you do the first one?
Okay. That we approve bills and directors' orders of $7,400 $700,048.24 to, oh my gosh, 748,024.29.
Got it.
Thank you. Payroll, 1,262,073.21. And student accounts, 37,874.01.
And this is
This is
for the
for
month?
November review. That didn't get
Yep.
okayed in December.
Okay.
And then their bills and directors' orders for board approval for the month of December is $2,269,535.85.
You showed me up.
I worked on it while you
Yeah,
were
well,
doing
thank
it. And the board approval of payroll is $1,323,304.25. And the total student account disbursements is $21,763.60.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I mean, we did the same system that we've been doing before, and, reviewing 10 bills, 4 payroll checks, and student accounts. It's high, I mean, it's high this time compared to that one, but that was an EEI payment.
Yeah, there was,
Of some sort.
there was
Okay,
2 EEI
Because it's
payments,
three times as much.
Right, right.
That's what the
Okay,
main
okay,
driver.
fine.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? All right, all in favor of approving those
Aye.
bills and directors' orders? Please
Aye.
say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, all right, school choice limit. So, well, this is something we'd have to do annually.
Yeah.
Public High School Choice Act 129 of 2012 is the reason we have to do this, and this is approving the number of students that we allow into and out of our high school, Soule High School, correct?
Right.
Yes.
What is it now?
Been
It's
10
10 in and
forever.
10 out, and it's been that for, I don't know, ever, apparently, since 2012, probably.
Do fewer, but, because it's 10%,
We have-
10 a year or 10%, whichever's fewer, so it's technically let fewer, but I'm not necessarily recommending it, I just
And
wanted to-
currently, we have how many coming in?
10. Oh, coming in, we have 6, I think, and 10 out.
But money does not follow these students. Is that true?
Right, we don't pay tuition. Right, right.
And we don't receive tuition.
don't
either.
receive
anything.
But we have, right, we have less
Still
coming,
get the-
fewer coming in than going out, so.
10% would be, I'm sorry, 8?
4.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's
just
Of the high
It's
school.
just 7
Oh,
through,
'cause
or
it's the high
8,
school.
9 through
Right.
12.
But it,
In and out, oh, okay.
Spreadsheet.
Oh.
It fluctuates
Yeah.
from year to year, but this past year, I think we're at 10 and 10.
10 and 10? I
Oh,
thought, we
okay.
looked the other day, I thought it was
We
6 and
used,
10.
we used all of the slots, so. The only other thing to keep in mind is for students who do want to come in or come out, so let's say we have 2 more students than we have slots for going out. We draw names, and whoever's
Right.
name doesn't get drawn, they're sitting there waiting, so they don't get an opportunity to be in the pool then in the school that they would like to go to. And we had a student who, we then got a spot for him, but it was too late at the school he wanted to go to, so he's currently here now.
Okay.
Which is fine, he's surviving and doing okay, and on the
Right.
track team and all that good stuff.
Right,
but,
right.
So I don't know if it's worth opening it up a little bit more so that we have a little bit more flexibility since somebody doesn't follow.
Do
So it
we-
makes our jobs easier not having to explain to parents why a student can't come in or can't go out, but.
Have we had the flip side, have we had to limit students from coming in as well?
Yes. Although again, this year we had a wait list of students who wanted to come in but couldn't. It originally was around 4 or 5, and then we had a spot open up. A number of those students had figured out other plans, and so we ended up going all the way down the wait list to the last student, and he is here and took that last spot that became available, actually over the summer, it became available.
Do we
So-
know what numbers other schools offer? Do you
I
know,
don't.
Jay?
It was 10 and 10 in my last
CVU
district.
apparently allows anybody in or out.
No limit.
We've never had a problem getting a kid in or
Oh,
out.
I've heard the opposite.
12, we could do 15. George?
It's,
Could read their policy.
George?
so we don't pay tuition and they don't pay tuition to us, but does it impact our equalized pupil count?
They do count as.
Elizabeth, does it impact our pupil
We get to
count?
count them as a student enrolled in our school, if they're in our school.
And so
But
if
the
they
ones
leave-
going out,
The
we
ones
don't get to
going
count.
out, we can't count.
Yeah, so, second question?
Yes.
Can we make it asymmetric, like we only let 10 out, but 20 in?
I'm with him.
Yes.
Or
Why not?
unlimited
If
numbers
we've got
in?
a
I mean, you know, if that's gonna help our numbers, right?
Right.
We need a bigger denominator.
I don't know that.
I don't actually know that.
Well, we got to look at this law.
I don't know.
Why, if it doesn't
Vote
vote?
on it tonight, or can it be rolled over till the next?
I believe we need to do it tonight.
It has to be done by
Yeah, it has to be done by the
January 15, I know that, yeah.
That-
Is there a policy, John?
Yes, there is. It's,
No.
no, there's not.
There's
There's
not a
not for
policy.
this.
There's a
There's
law.
statute.
This is a-
Does anyone want to see a copy? I printed extra
Oh, you printed it.
copies
I
because
just pulled it
thought
up.
you might-
We're required to determine annually our capacity to receive students.
We don't have any limit
If
on
more students
capacity.
want to transfer out of or enroll into, schools are allowed to limit the number of students who may transfer from with a cap of 10%. May set higher, so I don't see where it says they need to be symmetrical or equal or related to each other in any manner.
Yeah, they're like two separate things.
See here, a district
There
of
are schools that
residence
do.
shall include within its average daily membership
Well,
any
like,
students
South
and
Burlington
transfers.
only allows
There
one.
are ADM. So
One
they
in,
don't
one
allow-
out.
Yeah, but
you may.
you're gonna have a different number out than this.
Okay.
The money doesn't follow the kid at all.
Yep,
The-
go.
The district of residence retains the ADM.
We get, we keep the ones that we reside here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's
But-
no tuition and we keep,
We keep our
we
own
count
kids,
our
even
own
if they're not
kids,
in our school.
even if they go elsewhere.
They're
So
part of
Oh,
there's
so,
no
so it
benefit.
doesn't
It's
impact
on
the
the right
equalized
There's no benefit to
pupils.
taking
It's on the
in
third.
20.
There's no benefit to taking in
Under
more.
tuition and other costs, it's 3. It's item 3.
Yeah.
Is there a cost to taking this one? It's not a benefit, but
Did
it's,
you still have a question, George?
Well, there could be a cost if you have
I
to
guess,
add a
yeah,
section
I was
back.
trying to ask the administration if there was a disadvantage to letting more kids.
There's a question for the administration.
Or the superintendent's office to, I mean, is there any disadvantage to
Yeah,
letting
there,
more kids
there
in?
could be, I mean, I love the idea of having as many kids as want to come here, but there could be an impact if, say, we have to add a section of a course, so we have to add staff because so many kids need to get into algebra, or some course, right?
we don't.
And yet we don't get to count them.
But we don't count them. so-
The other thing, I mean, the only time we've had tuition-paying students in this district, in my 6 years here, is for students who wanted to participate in the Walden program, and they couldn't get in through school choice. They usually get it the next year or the year after, but if they want to come here badly enough, that does promote the paying of tuition, which is revenue.
That's an argument to keep it where it is.
That's exactly, yes.
In
you
terms of,
wouldn't want
in
it-
terms of
you-
incoming.
Increasing the amount, if you increase the amount coming in, you may
Right.
lose revenue in certain circumstances.
All right, well, I'm still looking for a motion.
I would move that we keep it at 10 and 10.
Is there a second? All right, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor of 10 in and 10 out, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Just 'cause, George?
Well, we can't always be unanimous, it's
Yeah.
all right. Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, this is the big
Next, tuition, yes. Can you give us a little background and then, but we will have the information to make,
So every year,
Okay, motion.
the state of Vermont has a calculation worksheet that we basically compile. We base it on, you're supposed to be projecting forward, so it's based on the current budget that I have. And projecting out what your estimated enrollment will be. So it's based on how many students you have in each grade level, so K through 6 and then 7 through 12. are computed into this. I put all the numbers into this little worksheet they give us, and it gives you a number of how much you would be able to charge for a student that was going to come into your school district. So the elementary, K through 6, is $14,896. And the secondary, grades 7 through 12, is $18,432.
Can you say those numbers again? I'm sorry.
14,896.
Yep.
And 18,432.
Wow, okay.
The elementary is slightly up from last year. The 7 through 12 is up more substantially than last year's amount.
And this
So we have to basically, we approve it in a board meeting, and then I send off this worksheet and all of its attachments to the Agency of Education tomorrow. And then also we have to send it out to area districts so that we're notifying everybody what our tuition rates are.
If we approve a budget with a different amount, this stays the same?
It stays the same.
Okay.
Yeah. And what happens is they true it up at the end of the year. So if they get to next year and they're in the middle of your budget year, the state does a calculation based on your stat book, which is your compilation of all your real numbers that went in, not your budgets, but your actual costs. They'll recompute, and if they find that you were able to charge more or that you charged too much, they'll give you that information and you submit a request to adjust the amount that you either charged to school districts, and it can go positive or negative. So if you don't approve your announced tuition, then what happens is you have to use last year's numbers if you got a student in. So if we didn't approve this tonight, the numbers you would have to use if someone decided to tuition into your school district next year would be the numbers that were approved last year.
Okay.
Which are lower.
And we have a policy that also, C-25, that says we must do this, John.
This is the one for January 15th.
Yes.
So I'd like to move that we accept the recommendation from the administration and set tuition as she said.
Yes.
Second.
All right, any discussion on this?
Is there a reason why tuition is lower than equalized spending?
You know, if I look at their worksheet, it's a compilation of, they ask for different brackets and they count it differently. So they'll ask for how much was budgeted for current direct expenditures for your students. And then they'll ask for, there's a whole group of expenditures that they say are excluded from your allowable tuition calculation. I think that's where it comes in. That's where it's different, because those costs, certain costs are excluded and certain costs are allowed. Even your debt service is actually allowed in here, whereas when you're doing your per pupil, you're kind of pulling that out as your credits. So it's just a different calculation using different expenditure numbers, but from the same budget.
Okay.
So in theory, a tuition student is not covering their costs.
No.
Right.
Yeah,
Because
and
our
this is
equalized
using
is over
enrollment.
19.
This
Right.
is using enrollment also, which is not a equalized per
Equalized.
pupil number.
Mhm.
So that's the other difference too.
Right, right, okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? No, okay. All right, we're postponing E, we removed F, so we are on to discussion. Discussion item A, next up for the long-range plans for facilities use. All right, so, do you want to start?
Sure.
You sound like you want to start?
I think it's a good idea to push it back. I think what I was hearing from Sheila is she really wants some clear guidance from us, and I think that one of the things that we don't have is a strategic plan for the board, and maybe if we can figure out a time to develop a strategic plan sometime in the spring, that could be one of the components of that would at least give the administration clear guidance about how to help us structure the conversation. I personally think that this needs to be, we need a lot of input from the community as a whole.
Yeah.
I would prefer, I don't know if a vote, but I mean, obviously, if a school is being closed before July 1, 2021, then that would have to go to a vote. But even if I don't want to close a vote without, excuse me, I don't want to have us talking about closing a school without it being a robust community discussion. I think we need to come to some consensus about a couple of different plans that we think about, and I think we need to have conversations with all of the communities in the district. So I don't think we can do that in the next 6 months. Because I don't think we have enough of a sense about what we're doing. So I'm all for pushing it back a year. I don't think we want to push it back too much further than that, because then we just look like we're lollygagging, you know what I mean? That we're wasting our time.
Well, and also with the budget, I mean.
There are real budgetary
we're
concerns
going to
about
need
why
to-
we
to
need to
do
be thinking
something
about
here.
what our.
Yeah, right.
So
you spoke to the timeline. How do you feel about the engaging with a consultant?
I'd
Bless
like
you,
to know how
George.
much the consultant is gonna cost us.
Right.
And, you know, if it's $20,000 to tell us that our demographics are declining, that's probably not money well spent.
Well, we have that information. To
would
be
be more
clear,
than that.
the service that they offer is an analysis of how you're using your facilities currently and how you could use your facilities differently.
I don't suppose they
So-
could do the buses too.
Yeah, probably not, but, to
Yeah,
the
but we-
point, I still think they'd wanna know, what are you trying to accomplish?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
So that's still the missing piece. It isn't
Right.
creating those scenarios of, gee, we could do this, or we could do
No.
that, or we still have to figure out to what end would we do anything at all. So
Right.
if it's an affordability agenda, let's just be clear, then you say to them, we need to figure out how to use our facilities more affordably, right? And then they would help achieve that outcome.
Well, of
But
course-
this is also a group that has an educational lens, right?
Correct.
I mean,
This is their work, yeah.
Mark,
I don't know if anybody saw VT Digger's leaked white paper.
yes.
So that's the other consideration, is that the state is working its way towards a single school district with 4 regional superintendents who will have the power to close things at their will.
Did you see Nicole Mace's response?
I was there at the meeting.
So
Nice
how far do we
response,
go down our path if in 3 or 4 years the state says what they did with healthcare? Guess what? Next year, you're out. We've
Are
put
you
all
our-
our plans together. So
Gearing
if
to
that's
do
the goal they're heading towards, then I think the best we can do is try and figure out how to get ahead of that, which we're sort of doing with our regional schools. So kind of focus on what do we do with Addison, Rutland, I don't know, South Chittenden? How do we start combining so that if that train heads our way, we can always say, we're covered, we're good, we're our own little region, we're number one, and go find the other 3 regions. We've set it up the way we like.
Are you saying like form a study committee and
So
start
I
the merger
just- yeah,
process?
basically. How
Because
can
that's its own
To make
thing,
us our own
right? It's
regional.
just like what you just went through.
Yep, I
but
know,
with-
and that's painful, and
yeah.
that's, but that's, if they're gonna do it anyways.
I think
then
my point
it'd
is
be
just
nice
it
to be
won't
able-
happen unless
No.
you formalize it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to the VD Digger article, it's like, this is just kind of what we did last time, where Sheila brought an idea, and they're saying it's an idea, we're future thinking what might happen, but
Right.
there are fewer students, well, there are fewer people in Vermont than there are students in LA County.
But there's more area,
Right, but they
I
are one
mean-
school district.
Yeah.
you know? Right.
2 million people,
Yeah.
staff, students, faculty, so it can be done with one school district, with the numbers we have.
Well, and the flips, related to that, I guess, but with a little bit different spin, is also depending on what we do at this juncture, with a lens at both budgeting and quality education, would position us differently as we, if we were to get to a point where the state was asking for further merging too, I think. I mean, if we were to cut ourselves down to only 2 buildings, prior to that, you know, without looking beyond us. But if we were to be fewer buildings, it's a lot easier for them to overlook us than if we try to
Positively or
maintain
negatively?
and grow our system.
Negatively.
Negatively, okay.
Overlook us negatively.
Well, if the big overlord is overlooking you, then that's a good
You wanna
thing.
hide.
But if the big
Miss
over,
you.
Overlook
I mean,
as
that's
in
how they dump the
brush
wing
you
into
into
the
another
fires.
district,
but,
sweep
but,
you
but the
along.
problem, I mean, you know, they can't. There are limits to the numbers of schools that can be closed because there are limits to how much time kids are going to be on buses.
Well, that, right.
I mean, so
just,
the
you know.
Los Angeles, as you were just pointing out, the Los Angeles is a limited. I think we need to move forward.
More traffic though, so.
Say, it might take longer to get across LA than it would be to drive to the Northeast Kingdom.
Fair. I think we can't know what
Right.
what the Scott I mean, we don't know what the Scott administration is going to do for their proposal in like mid-March after we passed our budget. So I think that we can control the things we can control.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Which is that we can have we have these 4 buildings, we have relationship with our communities that we should be, you know, not just what do you think, but here's what we think should be done. How do you respond to that? Like this should, I think, be a back and forth conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
I need to point out that we've already started that conversation.
I know you have.
And I think it's really important that we build on what we've started, because I don't want the people that came out to our events to feel like it was lip service and we're gonna take a right turn and kind of, oh, and now we've decided this. I think we need to take the information that we've gotten from the community and sort through it and say what's viable and what isn't viable, and then go back to them. And I'm not quite sure, as the Community Engagement Committee, I think we're kind of, Sue and I had a long conversation, we're gonna like pull back a little bit, but I think it's important for the community to know that we value that they came out at night and that they gave us their time. And
Well, and I think there were a lot of really great ideas generated from those conversations. And there's no reason, I mean, if we are able to work with a consultant, that we can't take some of that information and pass it along, and we can pull some goals from that, perhaps.
I mean, one of the points of those evenings was to inform our conversation, right? I mean, take that information and then look at it and say, well, where do we go from here? Knowing X, Y, and Z from our community.
Right. So where do we go from here?
Yeah. Best case scenario, don't close any schools. Worst case scenario, close 1 or 2 schools. I don't know. I mean,
So,
I think this is a conversation that should be in one of our retreats. I think it would be easier to.
Well, we tried to have a retreat like that already once. We didn't accomplish too much, I don't recall.
I mean, that was kind of the range of the community feedback.
Right.
You know, take the 4 schools and make something great.
Right.
Or, you know, start doing what seems like writing's on the wall, even though we don't really want that to be the writing on the wall.
Well, we either cut costs or we generate some sort of revenue and or try to attract more students, right? I mean, that's
But we're
pretty
not
much.
the only ones that are in that boat.
No.
No.
Kind of like,
region.
what?
The whole region's in that
Yeah.
boat.
Pretty much
Superintendent-
rural America.
The superintendent suggested that we start a program with the Chinese. That would get a Chinese language instructor in the school. It would get the kids talking because they'd have Chinese students. They would.
Right.
I mean, you'd grow your population base and your programs at the same time by doing that.
So I think, like as Sheila was saying, we could go round and round about a lot of different ideas. And that's the easy part, right? But what we really need is we need a lens to decide through, you know, and part of that's gonna come from the community, but we're gonna need to go to the community with some options, right? That have some costs attached and some pros and cons attached to them, right? So that people have information to base their opinion on. So I guess we can wait and see what the consultant might cost and what, I mean, can we get a sample of what they might have done? Some
yeah.
other work that they would have done?
I'd be curious to know, like, what other districts have they worked in and what they accomplished in the end.
They actually, they did a big reconstructing project with the Agency of Education back when Armando Villaseca was the commissioner, which is kind of going way back, which is just kind of interesting that they did that with Vermont, but they're New England based, so I'll see if I can find a sample of a final report or something they may have given to someone in a similar circumstance to ours.
George?
To use them.
And with respect to, attracting Chinese, I mean, Albert was from where, Taiwan?
He was an exchange student.
I'm not remembering now.
Anyway, I believe he was from Taiwan. I think he had a great time here from what I've heard. And so, if we could get him to make a video and say, hey, come to Virgins or something like that. I mean, first person
It's
endorsement.
marketing. I mean, marketing is,
Yeah.
yeah.
That could be really powerful.
Part of,
A Taiwanese making that video probably wouldn't convince the Chinese to come.
You don't have to know he's from Taiwan. I don't know.
There's
That's
a
his
bunch of people in
accents.
Taiwan, though.
okay, all right. So we're gonna get some more information regarding the consultant. Yes, go
We're
ahead.
getting more information regarding the consultant, but I think that Sheila also made the point that we need to know what we're privileging.
Right.
And so we need,
Right.
and I mean, loath as I am to organize another committee meeting, not a committee meeting, I mean, it seems to me that sometime in the spring, perhaps late March or early April, we should have a meeting specifically organized around the question of what we want to privilege. Hopefully getting towards a strategic plan that we could use as a guide. So in terms of structuring the conversation,
Right.
the first part of the we've gotten the initial engagement with the community. We have feedback from the community, but the next step really, as in the way that Sheila laid it out, is that we have to know what's important to us.
We do,
know,
because there's no other way to make a decision. We
Right.
have to agree on really what we're trying to do before we can decide which route does it best.
Right.
Right.
Well, we need to figure out a timeline too. Are we talking about what's gonna happen in the next 18 to 24 months, or are we worried about what's gonna happen in a decade? Are we treading water, or are we figuring out how we see?
I think the
this-
next 18 to 24 months is us treading water to figure out where we're going in the next decade. I mean, so I think that's why I don't have the answers.
I don't- I'm not-
But if we're not pushing ourselves to come up with some priorities, like this process is going to take 2 to 3 years at the fastest. And so I think we need to be actively starting thinking about it now. And it seems to me that the one thing that the consultants they're not going to have a limitless, palette of, or they may have a limitless palette of things, but how are they going to choose? We're going to get much better service from anyone who helps us if we are clear with them. So
are you thinking we should do like a strategic planning committee, or try and do a strategic planning day where we can all get together and?
One or the other, right?
one or the other would make sense.
Like just an ad hoc committee for a single purpose, not an ongoing long-term committee. I
Right,
guess.
something like that, or, I mean, maybe each one of us really wants to be part of that, which.
In which case a retreat would make more sense.
Right, yeah.
Although, to be honest, if we do, yeah, I know.
Strategic planning workshop.
Rating with 12 or 15
It might,
people.
if we wanted to go to a full board work session, I think we might still want to give consideration to having a committee who came up with a suggested outline when we go into that work session, because I think we've actually had a couple retreats where we were supposed to come out of them with a strategic plan, and we still don't have a strategic plan. So it may be more effective if we actually have a subgroup of this board at least develop
To draft.
a draft, an outline, something moving into the day that then the rest of us can react to and add to. Does that make sense?
So is that something we should do today?
What?
Create this
Well,
committee?
I actually would wait, why don't we wait
Yeah.
until February?
Already.
I know
I
there's a
mean,
lot of stuff on February, maybe that's too late.
We could assign a committee February.
We have a board meeting on the 23rd, I see, yeah?
We do have a
That's,
board meeting on the 23rd.
and that'll be
Oh.
just for the,
No, it's not. We're gonna have committee reports and whatnot. We have that meeting as well. We could do it then as well. Do people wanna move on it that quickly? Forming a committee? It's not really a big, it's not really a big step.
I mean, there's probably
I think we should do it on the 23rd.
real
I
reason
don't
to
think we should wait
wait.
till February.
No, there's no reason. All right.
This has already gone on longer than it should have.
Well, I don't know if it's gone on longer than it
There's
should
somebody in
have.
this room that could even meet as an ad hoc committee this month. I mean, just between budget negotiation, everything, there's not a whole lot.
I know,
free
but we
time,
can still
so-
form the committee and then
Form
they
it,
can
but
at
it's
least
still
be
not gonna
looking at
meet
their
until at least
calendars.
February.
That's right.
Okay, well, we'll put it on the agenda for, January to
An action
form a
item.
committee, as an action item to form a
there a-
committee.
Is there a template?
Simply,
I
for
mean,
a strategic
I like-
plan?
Like, if I've got on a
Oh,
committee to kind of figure out what we want, I don't know that I would know what to do. Like, I'm willing to give my time, but I don't know how to write a strategic plan. I don't.
Right.
Can we start with what we have? Do we have anything, like, from the processes we've been through?
Why don't we leave-
Yeah.
let's-
Writing.
why
We
don't
have
leave
a
that to
statement
ideas?
or two, maybe. We might have a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll
So
see.
could we leave that for the
I do
committee?
well with templates.
Yeah,
To
I
decide?
think the committee,
The ad
Sheila,
hoc
do you have
committee?
Right.
Strategic plan templates? Okay.
yeah. I'm sure we can Google it.
Right.
Okay. Is that good for,
That's what we did for the vision
guess it's-
statement.
It's
Right.
just a discussion.
we've,
We've discussed
yep,
it.
we've discussed it. Okay, so, discussion item B is annual meeting, inclusion of article for voting from the floor on the March warning. So this is a question for all of you. If you recall, per our articles of unification, all public questions must be voted by Australian ballot. And per the Secretary of State, any question is a public question. So this is asking, we have the option of putting an Australian ballot question on in March or next March or at any point to ask the voters if we could vote for XYZ items from the floor. Why would we want to do that? Well, there are a couple things that lend themselves better to voting from the floor. It also actually gives a purpose to having an annual meeting, because right now, the annual meeting, there is no action at the annual meeting because it's all on Australian ballot. So some of the things that we have voted from the floor in the past prior to this are authorization to borrow money in like the tax anticipation notes, stipends for the board members, clerk and treasurer, authorization to electronically distribute the annual report instead of mailing it out, and that one doesn't count. So I guess those would be the three items, or any or all of those we could put out to the voters to ask if it would be okay for, not us, but for the public meeting to vote on those things from the floor. So this is a question to all of you to see if anyone wants to do that, or if we should just leave it as all public questions go on Australian ballot.
As you said, the meeting is a farce at this point because you can't do anything. So we ought to at least try this.
How many people show up at the meeting then?
At the annual meeting?
Well, not very many. I mean, I'm trying to just,
No,
25 or 30?
including us.
Last year there were, weren't there?
Mm-hmm.
This always seems like it's a very, I mean, compared to.
Seemed like 1,000 yelling at John and me.
I'm just, you know, thinking of the whole population of our,
Mhm.
and if only 25 people show up, is that a fair representation?
But it makes a very cumbersome operation if you have to do everything by Australian ballot. I mean, there's no initiative, there's no activity,
There will be more items on the ballot, more things that people are voting for, or against, I guess. In terms of like stipends, so it would be up to us to decide what stipend to put on the ballot for the treasurer, say. There'd be no discussion if we wanted to give the treasurer a raise. It would be our call, and then it would either pass or not. And then I'm not quite sure if it doesn't pass, if that means
See, I still
they
think
get
that's
no.
arguable, because you need to establish it before you can even vote on it.
Right.
yeah. If you have a question like that on the open floor and it fails, then somebody makes an adjustment to it and makes a new motion, and you resolve it.
Right.
Either that time or the next try. I mean, and there's, people can say, well, look, I know that job's really hard, and I've been watching, and he's been spending this amount of time doing this, and it justifies a higher amount. Or somebody might say on the other side, darn, I know he spends 5 minutes a week on that, and we ought to cut his pay. So it's something that you need to have that discussion, and once it goes on an Australian ballot, you absolutely eliminated that.
I mean, we could gather input here too. We could say, we're gonna talk about this tonight and have people come. Glory?
Your salaries for the officers are already in your budget, so they've already voted on
Right.
that number anyway. So it's really, the only thing that you're establishing is that you're setting a certain amount to each individual. But you've already approved, the voters have already approved that budget number in that
So you
total
could
line.
Decide you're gonna distribute it across the
Yeah.
rolls differently or
Mhm.
something.
But it still needs to be on the Australian ballot. That's what the attorney just told us the other day, right?
Every year? We have to determine what we get paid every year?
Normally, it's done on the floor. That's what we used to
Yeah,
do.
I think it
always
makes-
used to be done on the floor.
I think it makes more sense to have this, to put an article on here that says we can do this, so that in the future, the annual meetings determine something, and, because it's,
Also, what if they vote down, what if it gets voted down to the authorization to borrow money?
Yeah,
Right,
then what do you do?
right.
I mean, I don't, you know?
The point of the annual meeting is to have the public that's engaged enough to come here have a voice and make decisions about what we can do. And, yeah, okay, there's only 40 that show up, but that's not our problem. They know to be here, and if they don't want to show up, then they don't have their vote.
and we're not asking them for like radical, like, they're not approving the budget. I
No,
guess
there's no financial
No, there's really
pieces.
no financials. Like Gloria said, everything's already in the budget. It's just to borrow, it would be to borrow the money, to save money by distributing the booklet electronically rather than printing them all and mailing them out.
Yeah.
And how to divvy up the stipends, I guess, with the treasurer and ourselves and the clerk.
But
This was what we meant to do, and by some
I know.
confusing language in the consolidation, we ended up not. So this would only be bringing it back to how it has been historically.
We would take 3 items off the ballot, the Australian ballot.
Well,
And
this
we
year.
would add one
This
to
year they
get
have to be
3
in
off in the
Yes,
future.
this year we would have all
All
4.
3
The
with
3
4?
plus the 1,
Yeah.
and then if that
Then the
one
next
passed,
year-
next year there would be 3 fewer.
Well, if we're already gonna have 3, plus we've got a budget that's tough, no matter what it is, then I would say this is the year to just add another
Put it
one.
on.
It's not, we don't have
How would you
we
like
don't have
to
another
not
bump.
have to vote as many things next
Yeah,
year?
I mean, it just, and some of it's gonna, can be
Yeah,
wordy, you know?
they're used to seeing one ballot,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Right.
possibly two,
Right.
you know.
Exactly.
It's gonna be a handful.
Or
And-
articles.
And it's a publicly warned thing anyway. I mean, it isn't like we hold a meeting in secret,
The annual meeting, gosh, no,
Right.
right,
so.
right, and all those articles are still printed and warned.
So
All right,
what's the
so-
mechanism for counting the votes?
For counting the votes?
It's by the town.
The towns count them, and then they
report
call
to us,
Glory,
and they're counting.
or they deliver.
Oh, so it's gonna be, one less thing I can get.
Yeah,
One less count.
Accuse myself from
Yeah.
that.
right, so they're gonna have to count all these things for us too.
Yeah, they're gonna want
Oh,
separate
yeah. Oh,
ballots
man.
for each
I'm
Yes,
voting
article.
down.
yes, we will.
All right,
Mark's
Because
already
there's a
told me
pain
that.
when there are 9 questions on one sheet and you have to
Oh.
make a grid.
so it's gonna be
There's gonna be
We're
nine,
gonna
or,
have
well, right,
Hashtag,
yeah, there'll be
hashtag,
9
oh, it
articles.
didn't come out
9
right.
articles.
Go back and redo it. But they're until like midnight.
You
I
have
just
to,
threw
you
9
have to
out.
Well,
vote
no.
for the treasurer.
Because
You
you've
have to
got,
vote for the clerk.
No, no, no.
no, they don't do that on, you
No,
don't
we
do-
will
you
still,
can do
we
that.
still can elect people. Electing
Okay.
people is not a public question,
Okay.
Hold on, I've got them right.
according to the Secretary of State.
And this was because of our articles of
Yes.
consolidation?
And I don't think, it was,
It'll be
like Mark said,
5.
it wasn't the intent
5.
of the
Right.
study group. Yeah.
Do we have to indicate what in the warning?
We would write out the three items.
The 3 items that could
Yes.
continue to,
Right,
okay.
We're trying to
Yes.
get
Yeah, we're
best
trying to
language
get
for
that
that
language
right
too.
now.
Okay.
Yes. We would write out the 3.
So we would need to warn that, we would need to vote on this next week on the 23rd, correct?
It
Yes.
would be part of the warnings. yeah.
This is a question right now to decide if we want to put
Moving right
this,
along.
put this on. So do
In-
most people,
In straw poll,
yeah. do
straw
people
poll,
think-
who's for this?
Yeah. Who wants this on the ballot?
Straw poll against?
Okay. We'll work up that
Is that an
warning.
against or a for?
Well, I saw almost everyone's hands go
Yeah,
up,
so I
so
think-
I was, okay, so we will do it. Thank you. Discussion to review the Front Porch Forum summaries commitment. We had committed to do this back in August, and we said we'd give it a 6-month trial and revisit it, so that is why it's on here. Christina and I have been faithfully posting the summaries. We think they're being read.
Yeah, we've gotten a few emails, thank you emails
Like
for,
a
like, putting it
few.
up there, and
Oh, wow.
a couple other questions.
Like, how many replies have you gotten in total
Oh, I'd say maybe like 4.
in 6 months' time? So it's not an overwhelming, but
I
but
think
that
that's
doesn't mean there's
great.
not more
I-
people reading it, obviously.
Yeah.
That's
about
4
you? Have
people
you
giving
gotten-
feedback.
Yeah.
That means a whole lot more are reading it and not giving any feedback.
Yeah.
At least that's.
I mean, if anything, it's like visible, we're out there once a month, we've got this stuff up there, and people can choose to look at it or not, but they know we're working for them.
Right.
No, it's good.
And we're not finding it
Onerous.
too
Not
onerous.
too bad, no.
Once in a while, we almost forget, but no. All right, so people are happy.
doing it.
Shall we continue on?
Yes, I'm thankful.
Okay,
I'm really grateful.
we will continue on
I
with
love
that.
seeing our name in that. I really do. I just think it feels good.
All right,
Too bad we couldn't send pictures.
pictures. All right, awesome. Well, that brings us to item 7, executive session.
I move that
Oh.
are we inviting Sheila?
We are definitely inviting Sheila.
I move that we go to executive session for the purpose of a personnel matter under statute 1 VSA 313A1A and invite our illustrious superintendent to join us.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming.